I should have given you guys more heads up on that.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we got a good 4 seconds of warning.
Yeah, no,
Hello?
I mean it is our start time here. But yeah, I apologize.
Ready or
We're
not?
off to
You
a good
could have
start.
just delayed a minute.
I could have. But welcome everybody. Okay, so let's get right into it. Anything to add here, guys?
No,
No.
we are
Start
ready
talking
as
about
we are
scores?
publish.
Alright, let's get into scores. So, let me throw up this score sheet. I know y'all can't read this resolution, and I apologize because I can't read it either. But these are the teams that have taken the tournament so far, and, well, I'll get to the chase. Docaholics Anonymous is our winner for this tournament. 22 points.
I speak as loud as I can.
In second place, we have the Purple Pirate Platoon, and in third, we have probably... That's, no, I'm misreading entirely. Hold on. Higher resolution of this.
Yeah, it's not top to bottom.
It's not top to bottom. You're right. I have completely misread this. I apologize.
Second
to
place
the
is
Purple Pirate
Spaceballs, I
Platoon.
believe.
Spaceballs sounds about right. Spaceballs is a good fleet. Okay. Hold on, we've already got a bot in here.
Already?
That
Okay.
was quick.
Yeah. So second place is in fact the Spaceballs, the tournament team, with Morsha and the cart. Daddy Pants and Ruben take first with 22 points on Tiandong and Vanilla mid-tech. Morsha and the cart running Polaris and Mayasurin Navy. A very good showing from Mayasurin and a good debut for Polaris, actually. And then in third place, we have the Light of Sura with Deskup and Johan running Aprolite and again Mayasura.
I have to wonder what happened in round 3 for the Spaceballs team.
Oh man, I don't even recall round 3 for Spaceballs. I know that they had just an exceptional showing in round 4.
Also in round 2, they got 6 points in each, but then round 3, something happened. I'm not sure what. I don't recall that.
Yeah.
The fleet is built on 2 capitals. They lost one very early to the Phase fleet, I believe.
Yeah, the Spaceballs fleet was always a big, yes, we can fumble really hard fleet.
And Spaceballs was actually one of the few very tall fleets we had that did really well. It wasn't super tall, but it was tall in the sense that the whole fleet pivoted around 2 capital ships instead of a strong core of cruisers and destroyers.
I see in every round of testing they had both really great performances and really bad performances, because it was really just a coin flip whether the Mokon did something stupid and died early.
That happened a lot.
And that is the problem of tall fleets like that, and is part of why Docaholics Anonymous did so well in that tournament, because Docaholics Anonymous just ran a very tight, very wide, and very optimized fleet.
It looked like there was just a lot of hammerheads.
I mean, that fleet was basically just one fleet of ablative armor.
Yet the Colic was very swingy in the testing. They are the fleet that got the highest difference between testing and final score.
Yeah, I think that the Docaholics Anonymous had more going for it than just the ablative hammerheads, and that the ablative hammerheads weren't actually all that ablative, because once it lost the hammerheads in round 4, it very much collapsed.
I remember watching some of that fleet, and from what I recall, the 3 Griffins seemed to play a huge role, both as tanks and as primary damage dealers, because they were incredibly difficult to kill, especially when backed up by 4 drovers.
Skill depth too. They have all 3 had captains, high-level captains.
Yeah, the what made Dockaholics Anonymous so comprehensively powerful was having the backbone of safety overrides destroyers, which offered just massive firepower and numbers. The core of strike carriers, which carriers are just strong in general, and then having the 3 griffins spamming missiles into the battle space.
Not just Griffins. They had the Tiandong missile destroyer, the Tarsus conversion.
Basically, they had a lot of missiles, which was a very big factor. Like it wasn't just ship spam; it was also missile spam, and the fleet was so wide that they could put out an insane amount of missiles really fast, and just kill things before PPT would ever be an issue.
Let me throw our fleet here. We are talking about so Dockaholics Anonymous. Yeah, they're just the Tuolus, the Hammerheads, the Griffins. So much meat on the line from this fleet, and I don't think it really doesn't shock me on any level that they did so well on rounds 1 and 2. Round 3 gave them a little bit of trouble, just because High Tech is good at responding to fast-moving targets, because it also moves pretty fast.
I believe they had some fumbles on the phase wave in particular in testing, right?
They had fumbles in every round, and generally that's when I stopped testing them. So maybe that's why they appeared weaker in testing.
I would expect them to struggle with a phase wave, just because phase was always going to be very existential for a fleet that lives and dies by CR as much as an SO fleet.
That and SO fleets also, it's rather rare for them to have weapons that are good against phase ships, a la beams, high intensity lasers, anything like that, because they're all short range ballistics, and phases ships are fantastic at getting out and avoiding.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they had missiles that run in circle.
Missiles and carriers, so many. Turn Nia down on my end as well.
Yep.
I already turned myself down, so.
Turn you back up. I want people to be able to hear everyone. Because I can't actually turn Tart any further up, guys. I'm sorry.
We all have Tart at like 200%.
Yeah. But enough about the SO fleet. Like, we could sit here dissecting every single ship on this fleet.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a bajillion of them. Let's move on to our second place fleet, which we've already touched on a little bit. Spaceballs, the tournament fleet. So, as we said, the McCarran very much carried this fleet with the Storm Needler, but that meant that if the McCarran did something stupid, the fleet
No.
collapsed.
What carried the fleet was absolutely the transit. It was
Yes.
just that the Mokan was the biggest fumble factor.
Right. Yeah, fair enough.
Transit would always perform well, like we had in testing. You had the Mokan die in round 2, and the transit would still carry the fleet to round 4.
The transit was kind of a weird ship. I'm not very familiar with Polaris as a faction, but the transit always kind of surprised me because it's very flashy when it moves around and not nearly so much when it fights. But it does
it's
have
kind of a Mary Sue.
It's just so durable.
It is
Nothing can kill it.
incredibly durable. I definitely noticed that. Just absolutely bonkers durability on that thing. Flux efficiency, everything.
And that HL cruiser on Mayasura did so much work too.
Yeah, the MOA was actually just a low-key top MVP in a couple of situations. And I think that did a lot of good work for Mayasura, because it was, being a cruiser, it's a bit less of a fumble factor than the big unwieldy McCarran, but it still put out some startling firepower.
Yeah, the Moa is also
I'll say.
extremely robust.
Yes, he tanked a lot. I don't
It's
think
a fortress
died
shield
soon.
here.
The Mokaran in this, that is one of the, in my opinion, most undervalued ships. Every single campaign that I've had a Mokaran in has always overperformed despite not being incredibly flashy.
Excuse me,
Just
undervalued. Everyone knows the Macron is kind of broke.
then why is it not really talked about much or really valued?
Because
that
because it
seems...
looks boring like a mid-tech ship.
It's just a DMA-like problem. It's just a bit too good, but not good enough that it's broken every time. You can build incredibly good loadouts.
Basically, it's a cookie cutter build ship with very efficient mount placement. It can do many things. It's very fast. It has good guns.
It
It's just a
has a
very
huge
strong
ceiling.
ship, but it doesn't have anything very special about it.
Strong but nerfed. Or
On the
strong but boring, sorry.
On the subject of being very strong, the transit's loadout is something that, holy Christ, 4 Reapers on that thing.
That was brutal.
Every time, like, I can't decide if I was upset that it only fired like 3 Reapers at a time, or if that's for the best, because 4 Reapers is just overkill on anything.
Yeah, those 4 Reapers were
3 Reapers
one of the best
with
things about the
only.
ship.
Fun fact: the transit initially had a problem with the weapon groups, and it would almost never fire its Reapers correctly in the first round. And I signaled it. I had to warn the player to fix that.
The original transit build was all beams with hard flux only being in heavy needlers. Oh god. I cannot imagine that thing with an all beam loadout, considering how hard it fucked with 4 Reapers.
Yeah, it might actually be considerably strong.
It might be even more annoying to kill.
It would be even more annoying to kill, but it wouldn't be as spectacular when it does kill things. Found that it didn't really kill much, and then the Reaper build came to be. That's what I was just saying, Car. Like, all beams, it probably would never have died, but it also wouldn't have killed anything.
What this team showed more than anything is that Polaris is in a really odd spot, where it is this faction with absurdly powerful ships, but they are also absurdly expensive, which is really the only thing that even held this fleet back.
Yeah, the Polaris fleet always felt like it was going very tall despite having very small ships. It never felt like it was going as wide as any of the properly wide fleets like Docaholics, but it also never felt like it was accruing a collection of big dick cruisers and capital ships. So, next, our number 3 team, Light of Sura, is another Mayasura team with Aprolite this time.
Three newcomers in the top 3.
Yeah, this fleet very much benefited from Chase buffing the Arjuna really hard mid-tournament.
I remember being a little bit frustrated at the Arjuna in the earlier rounds, because the Arjuna just has this chronic issue where the Gandiva has such a low turn rate, and because the AI is very bad about prioritizing fighters, even with heavy weapons, the Gandiva spends more time trying to track small targets than it does actually firing at big targets. And it just really frustrates me seeing Arjuna's waste time and ammo, or at flux, accomplishing nothing.
That might be fixed right now.
Yeah, I believe
in the game.
Chase made some changes also to improve the behavior of the
Yes,
Arjuna.
that. But I was thinking about the bug with if a weapon group can hit a target with all the weapon in the group, it would fire at the closest target,
Oh yeah, right.
regardless of size. That was a bug.
Yeah, that was an AI bug that I pointed out to, or rather that Alex found after I pointed it out. And apparently it was that the ship would always target the closest thing with the so to say primary or manually fired weapon group.
Yeah, and since it was the biggest weapon, it should have used it alone in its group. So that was precisely the perfect case for the bug to be apparent.
Yeah, which, I mean, I kind of want to talk more about the Light of Sura, but honestly, I don't know anything about Aprolite, and I feel like all the stuff that can be said about Maya Sura, we've already said. The MOA is very good, and all that stuff. So
I have a
The
small
Acolyte
issue.
fleet.
I have a small issue with the Reaper-like missiles from the Scholar.
yeah, the Scott,
Yeah, the Scholar's built-ins are pretty insane to just come for free on that hub.
Yeah, for Reaper-like missiles, super fast. Yeah,
They are insanely strong.
don't they heal
not
damage
great.
over time or something bonkers too?
Yeah, but that's not
Mm,
even necessary. It's those are some insanely powerful missiles, and they come for free on a hull that is by itself already quite good.
Mm-hmm.
That is,
has-
I believe,
it
it's
has
a
teleport.
24 DP cruiser.
Does it teleport too?
No, it has more of a dash, but close enough to teleport. It's extremely mobile.
Yes, it's mobile, alright.
Yeah, I mean, the Scholar is a meme for a reason.
Yeah, I
But
honest.
it's not really what they carried the fleet, from my understanding. Apparently, the big change this fleet had that made them better was adding those destroyer carriers, which are basically Aprolite drovers. They have reserve deployment, so
right.
good old drover spam,
Right.
basically.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Reserve deployment is very strong. News at 11, guys.
It was nerfed for the tournament.
Was it? I wasn't
Yes,
aware of that.
it's part of the patch more or less did along the line of the future patch from Alex. It in my version it no longer adds new craft. It just repair a fighter for each
Oh,
wing.
okay.
It
Very.
repairs all
That's
fighters actually.
very
It
good.
just replenishes the wings.
Yeah,
So
these destroy carriers are just insanely efficient at the base level already, because you usually get 2 base for a very small price. Like, Drover is insanely efficient even without reserve deployment.
Does that mean that reserve deployment on the Drover is now going to be just as effective for bombers as it is for fighters and interceptors? With that
sorry.
change going forward?
I don't know the change that Alex plans to do. He just mentioned to have nerfed heavily reserve deployment and the drover in particular.
Yeah, we will probably have to wait and see how that actually turns out.
Speaking of Alex, should we go over the Q&A from him?
I don't know. We are middle of the fleets, but maybe people are interested more in the Q&A with Alex.
Well, I mean, we've gone over the top 3 winners. Beyond that, I think we can go over the other fleets when we get to like highlights and stuff.
All right, good to me.
Johan wants us to talk a bit more about the fleets. Okay, that's understandable, guys.
Maybe you can go over them rather quickly.
Yeah.
Other
We'll keep going over fleets, I guess.
We do still have the highlight bits to talk about as well.
Yeah, let's do a quick pass of the remaining fleets.
All right, fair enough. So next up, let's just go from the top of the list. Now that we've got our top 3 out of the way, the Purple Pirates platoon with the Galaxy Brain Enlightenment.
That ship wanted to broadside so badly all tourney long.
Also, mind this
They
is
are
one of the 4
fortunate.
teams that got the public favorite vote, which upped their score ever so slightly. They also, however, received a -1 penalty during one of the rounds.
2 penalties they got.
Oh, it's only half a point penalty. Yep,
They got
you're right.
2. 2 times that they cheated.
Very slightly, like not even on anything that mattered. They just had a carrier that was like 2 OP over, I think.
Right.
Absolutely not worth losing half of
They
it.
have 4 carriers. That's something.
5 carriers. I think it was
At the time they had 4,
right.
I believe.
Archaon
yeah.
immediately trying to assign blame for that.
They are lucky that I pointed out that Ashiel exists, because their first build was very much worse for the entertainment. It had the repeater.
I gotta say the ORA side of the Purple Pirates had a very interesting approach that I'm still not quite sure I understand. Where they have the fighter spam carriers, very straightforward. The awkward blinders enlightenment, and the SO revelations, which is just kind of a very disjointed set of ships, I feel like. But it worked out very well with the Sylphon as a backbone. But then they have all those, what are they, Mirths? That were just
Yes.
PD boats. And I'm not sure. I mean, I guess Echo Casters are good EMP in the first place.
I
was
was
just to
going.
go wide and widen the fleet, which is just good for AI behavior.
I was going a bit heavy on missiles in the first 2 rounds, so I can understand why they wanted more PD.
And ORA has very good PD because their PD doubles as EMP.
Yes,
Sometimes.
that need to be addressed.
Yeah, the Echo's Caster is a very strong PD weapon.
The Ghostcaster is fine, but the Ishwal is probably a bit strong.
And then on the Sylphon side of the fleet, there was just a lot of ablative Celicas and a trio of just wildly powerful Velestries.
Yeah, the Velestri is very much a brick.
Yes.
Just a really, really sturdy brick.
That's
It is
I take
so
brick
much
fleet.
skill.
Yeah, the Velestri, every round I watched with a Velestri, I just got this vague notion that, man, this ship is out of control. And then I remembered that, no, it's not really broken, it's just that tanky. And having a super tanky ship with 2 large turrets is very powerful. Oh god, my internet.
It's high-tech Dominator.
Yeah, it's buffering on mine
Yeah,
as
pretty
well,
much
but
like
I mean, I hear you just fine.
Yeah, no, it's on my upload rate just for a second.
Wow, that's something.
Yeah, it's a very sturdy, but it's a ship, but it's also quite slow.
Very professionalism, Chimney. But I've just dropped from like 3 megabits upload to 500 kilobits upload.
Hey,
Ew.
welcome to my world.
So
Sounds awful.
luckily, as long as the audio works, it's not a big deal today. Normally this would be much worse.
Yeah, audio is probably still fine.
Anyway, next fleet.
Yeah, next fleet. Probably Cancer from Hums and Snowblind, and I can't decide about this fleet. Like, this fleet was cheated, but also I feel like it kind of deserved a little bit of it. Because as I was discussing with Tart earlier, the problem that probably Cancer really had, I think, was that the Dictators and the Caesar are just a very strong commitment to artillery from the Imperium fleet, while the Shadow Yards half of the fleet had just a very strong missile spam component. And so when
this was a really nice missile fleet on the Chiliad side, and I feel like the Imperium side could have done better by going more all in on just spamming ballistas to go with it.
Yeah, I think
so when the Caesar best showing was when it was doing the was it the concussion missile spam it has? I know it has 2 missile launchers that are really slow and really bold and red.
Yeah, I think it had javelins.
Javelin. It was most effective when it was firing all the javelins off.
I think that because both fleets were very committed to such a very offensive strategy of artillery fire and missiles, that when they faced a wave that pushed back really hard or caught something out of position, they just didn't have an answer to it.
Yeah, and
I mean technically they should have been pretty tanky. The Tartarus is a very good frontline tank with siege mode.
Yeah, but the issue was that because of fighter spam, some of the wave, a lot of them, were very heavily equipped to deal with fighters, and when you are equipped to deal with fighters, you are equipped to deal with missiles like a champ. So it completely nullified a lot of threats that this fleet could have posed to the waves.
Yeah, the problem is they did missile spam on one fleet and didn't really commit to it with the other half.
To be fair, they had a very strong missiles that was heavily nerfed run 3.
Yeah, that is also true.
Yeah, probably Cancer. I think Dictators just have a lot of potential to be extremely powerful, but just the lack of line destroyers and cruisers in this fleet kind of did them in. Clades really don't hold their ground.
2 fleet too tall.
Yeah.
It also didn't help that the Caesar was a bit derpy at times.
Oh yes, there is one of the highlights that is the Caesar never choosing a side.
Yeah, honestly, I think taking the apiaries off the Tartaruses and making them more direct fire cruisers would have done a lot for this fleet. Because
I mean that would have probably been a good idea after the nerf, yeah. But prior to the nerf, they were really broken.
They did remove the apiaries, I believe.
Did they? I recall
they kept one or two. They had the opportunity to retool their fleet. At least I don't recall if they did use that, but I did offer it.
Pulled them off after the nerf. Well, that's I apologize, and I was under the impression that they remained in, because I remember that was a big part of the fleet's gimmick early on. Was, oh god, the bees.
Yeah, but it did gave an impression that was solidly built on one weapon, and that weapon was gone.
Yeah.
I had that one in my memory then.
In that case, I don't know. I guess what needed to happen for this fleet was probably for Interstellar Imperium to strip a dictator or two and just commit to providing a strong line of destroyers.
Yeah, that and the Caesar not trying to solo dual Void Reaver in the last round.
Didn't it try to solo a Nova in round 3?
Yeah, it also I think it might have. But what really embarrassed it was when it tried to solo the Void Reaver and just couldn't hit it.
Yeah, I honestly think the ice wave was just pain for everyone that saw it in round 4.
Yeah, the ice wave should have been more thoroughly tested.
Yeah, we probably should have switched the Void Reavers for another ship, maybe. And we probably should have cut the stupid frigate.
It was just cheese. That way,
I mean, ice is just cheese in general, though.
Yeah, but there are cheese and cheese. That was blue cheese.
I am honestly impressed that Docaholics cleared the ice wave, because just the Night Seers and the Void Reavers were so well equipped to waste the time of a ballistic fleet.
And not the Void Reavers, actually. The Void Reavers are actually hard countered by the Darkaholics fleet.
Because they can
Because
get
Void
surrounded.
Reavers die when they get flanked. Yeah. Void Reavers can only deflect bullets that come at them from the front. If they get flanked, they die immediately.
Yeah, they are a perfect dueling ship. And
on,
that was
All enough ships,
it was
they
what
just
they
surrounded
did
them.
to the Caesar.
let's go on to our next fleet. Yggdrasil's Electric Time Bandits. This fleet was such a spectacle. 4 Aramanthian boars on, I'm pretty sure, Reckless with twin laser torpedoes.
So, Todd, what is your nerf for the boar again?
I want to downsize a launch to a medium,
That is gonna make some people cry.
but I want to give it a reloading system for the missiles.
That
The
sounds
total amount of missiles
terrifying.
left?
I want to
or
keep
it
the number of
firing?
missiles and but lower the burst potential.
Like, I think the best summary of Darkaholics as a fleet was in round 2 when it killed like 4 or 5 cruisers in 10 seconds in the first round, or first wave, and I think Yggdrasil's Time Bandits was just constantly edging that level of reckless violence at all times in all waves that the boars were active.
While the missiles were there, they killed everything.
Absolutely horrifying level of firepower, and the poor Niagara just couldn't contribute to this fleet until the battle was basically already over.
Until it got a proper loadout too. Because
I think the initial load was just they didn't have credits for anything better.
sure, but they could have updated it round 2. They waited for round 3, I believe.
I mean, I can see the logic in that, because the Niagara acted as the de facto fleet anchor and core, and it did the job pretty well.
Yeah, I think that the only issue the Niagara had was that because the boars were on Reckless, the boars really didn't respect the Niagara as a fleet anchor. They just kind of did their own thing, which got the boars killed a bunch, but the violence from those things, the constant hail of laser torpedoes.
Yeah, it was quite the
Maybe
spectacle.
I should do something about the the laser torpedoes too.
No, I think laser torpedoes are fine. Probably would have gotten similar results.
No, nothing about their firepower when they work, but something about how they bump off things when they are not armed.
Yeah, this was a really nice fleet anyhow.
But
I think it
I
could have
want to
done
point
better
out,
if the boss has remained closer to the Niagara to make use of it as a tank.
I want to point out the Vindicator SO.
Yes, the SO Vindicator,
That was something to behold.
the crime against humanity. When is Lightning JC getting banned for Vindicator abuse? Well, he didn't win the tournament, so later this evening.
Yeah, I'll take a
Something we must remind him forever now.
You see, we could have let this slide if he had won, but he didn't. And he must be punished for this because, good God, an SO Vindicator it's just an absolutely galaxy brain strat, and it's completely horrible.
That didn't work as well as he hoped, I believe.
Yeah, I find it really odd.
It did
Especially when you
something.
consider how well
sometimes.
Vindicators have done in previous tournament as the artillery ships they are supposed to be.
To be fair, I think part of why the Vindicator didn't do so well is because Vindicators very much depend on having a clean line of fire, and especially with one that wants to get so close. The low-tech side of this fleet was pretty wide, with just a dram, a bunch of hounds, lashers just fodder everywhere, and so even if the Vindicator hadn't been SO'd, there would have just been stuff in its way all the time. And if it weren't the low-tech ships, it would have been the reckless Psy ships.
You should have gone with more gremlins. They aren't in the line of fire. They are phased.
Yeah. I think that if they wanted to really make use of the Vindicator, they
Please do not advocate for gremlins.
That's the next Galaxy Brain take on low tech. A fleet of gremlins.
The Vindy should have been a Dominator. If there was only going to be one, I agree, Cart. I think that if they were going for Vindies in something like this, they should have thinned out the frigates and gotten a second Vindicator without SO, so that they have a more serious artillery presence. But let's go on to our next fleet. The Merchant Guild fleet, the Perv Starworks and Blackrock fleet, with the Chimni and the Kurmaraja.
That ship. That
The Chimni is a ridiculous ship.
Completely.
The Chimni was so powerful.
That ship has so much firepower with really good defenses, and it's also so absurdly mobile.
And it has a pretty good armor profile, where because the ship is so long and narrow, it's very easy for it to roll damage across armor or just dodge shots outright.
Hasn't it been
Talk about how it
changed a
tends
lot?
to kill its fleet mates.
It did have a friendly fire problem though.
Yes. Yeah. It changed a lot, I believe, in the last update.
Yeah, the last Prof update definitely made really massive changes, which makes discussing most of the Prof fleet kind of problematic right now, because half those fleet ships don't do what they did in the tournament anymore.
Mm-hmm. And then the Blackrock fleet was just very tried and true. The Antaeus is a little bit of a newcomer to the Blackrock
solid as
roster.
a brick.
Yeah.
Solid as a rock.
Antaeus is an insane ship, and I love it.
Yeah, I think the Antaeus is a newcomer, but the Antaeus is also an incredibly powerful ship. It's very reckless and wants to get in people's faces, where it has staggering firepower, but I think that with the Zabrases and fighters and the Chimning and stuff backing it up, the Antaeuses didn't bite off more than they could chew, typically.
That's strange for that ship, given that the ship system is the ship system on the Antaeus is weird in that it doesn't let you go backwards. It's a mobility system that only lets you go forwards.
I
mean, that's a very weird burn drive is that.
Yeah, I think that's why the Antaeus really needs a strong fleet backing it up that'll bail it out when it goes hard on somebody.
Yeah. I mean, the Antaeus is just a great ship with insane alpha potential. You can build that ship to just do so much burst damage.
Yeah.
Wait until you see what Cicerine is cooking for the next birdie update.
Oh, I am awaited with bated breath. But the Antaeus, just the 10 smalls, the large, isn't it a hybrid, and then the 2 medium missiles. It's a stunning amount of DACA.
The sheer amount of small mounts means you can put the I can't remember what they were called, but those really high alpha birdie kinetics. You put those on the smalls.
Shard cannons?
No, not those. The disc guns.
Oh, the shock fusers.
Yes, those. Whatever they're called now, they have to name now.
Oh, the H-beam.
Volley guns? No, not volley guns.
Those kinetics. They shoot disc-like projectiles. High alpha. But they have also really high projectile damage. They can punch through armor. That thing can have so much alpha damage, it can just delete stuff with a single salvo.
Yeah, and the only issue the Antaeus really has is that it has very chronic flux issues, but that's very much mitigated in a fleet context, especially if you can just kill things in the first volley. But yeah, not much to say about the birdie fleets. You know, the Anteuses are just very strong. The Krimiraj is a tried and true.
Yes, it was a
choice.
safe yet very well done fleet. Just the right amount of everything.
And the I would comment on the Prav Starworks fleet more, but I genuinely don't know anything about the ships used, other than what they did in the tournament.
They were effective.
Yeah. So let's go on to our next bad dudes. Oh, the most depressing fleet. The bad.
It should have worked. It should have.
It should have worked so much better than it did.
Yeah, this fleet fumbled a lot and fumbled hard. I think the Panda loadout was questionable.
The Panda loadout did it for did the fleet really disservice, because I know Ulan are great, but they are great in player hands.
Yeah, I think the especially like having paired Ulans is a very bold move for flux reasons. I think that Ulans are best used by themselves.
Ulans are great on the Gust and the Maelstrom, but on the Panda you want you want the Opfer or the Maelstrom.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
Mostros
this thing
and
would have done best with a pair of Mostros and some medium HE ballistics on the mediums.
yeah, some
Yeah, or the
Rexons.
opposite.
Or the
You can
opposite,
go
yeah.
Opfer and R2 and Glowtusk. Glowtusk would have been very good, since it is still a mobile ship despite being so big.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed about Diable in the AI's hands has told me if you're going to give the AI a ship and you're going to give them a panda, give them a Maelstrom instead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Maelstrom tends to be just more efficient.
I think
It's a more practical ship, and it's supposed to be.
Yeah, it says so in plain text in the description. Take 2 Maelstrom.
yeah, I think that another thing that the Diable fleet here did a bit wrong was the drafts. I think drafts, they're only really good in two contexts: in small fleet actions where their relative frailty isn't going to get them killed rapidly, and when there's a lot of them with banishes and reckless commanders.
I can see that.
Yeah,
Like
drafts are one of those all-in ships where you have to commit to a stupid idea that you're doing with them.
yeah, like we saw
But-
that in one of the previous tournaments where a Diable player just for a round as a wild card, they went all in on SO drafts with banishes and assault chain guns, and they devoured an Alistair and Paragon in seconds like piranhas.
You can go either long range, because long range draft is incredibly slippery and never has an issue with flux. So Rexon draft is pretty damn good. Or you go SO knife fighting with banishes and whatever you want to the front. Grave are pretty good. You can go R2 if you try to go behind the shield, and they will kill anything.
What this fleet should have gone for, though, would have been Sleets, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that
Because they needed to make their fleet wider, and Sleets are really good for that by being very tanky frigates.
yeah, Sleets are very good and very welcome line frigates. I think that they needed some calms in this fleet to give them.
Calms did a surprisingly big amount of work in the other Diable fleet.
Because I just don't think that either fleet in this matchup had a very strong line. Because Lamias are alright, and they had about 5 of them, but Lamias also kind of are very easy to push down. They don't respond well to sustained pressure, especially from multiple targets.
Yeah, it didn't help that the core ship of the Sci Fleet was Keto, which very much is not a line ship. So the rest of the fleet had to commit more to being a battle line. I would have probably replaced the Boar with something like an armored Crocodile.
Yeah, Korakata would have been a very strong, or a Drakene. It would have been very strong choices because Sai has some very exceptional line cruisers, and honestly, like in hindsight, with how poorly the Keto tended to perform, I feel like it would have been justified in just forsaking a capital ship for the Sai fleet entirely and taking a cruiser squadron.
Yeah,
Sai is
Kitsu,
definitely a prime choice for going heavy on cruisers.
They're a very cruiser school faction, yeah.
the Keto was never firing its gun, and that was painful to watch. The
Because
car did a lot of work, but the main gun, not so much. I hope that Alex fixes to the firing AI, and the new int will help a lot with that.
yeah,
Sai Fleet always wants cruisers, I find, and choosing to go with a capital, especially when your partner is already going for a pandemonium, is definitely a major mistake in my opinion.
yeah, the combination of a backline capital ship in a cruiser faction to another very cruiser focused faction that is in this case using a super capital is just very tall.
You can see the change of mind. They went for capital first round, both of them, and then only small ships, trying to get the whiteness they needed.
Mm-hmm. So let's go on to our next fleet. Gamer Team 6, the Zan Empire and High Tech Fleet. And
Ouch.
I feel really sorry for the LAN player on this
Yeah,
team
that was a tough one.
because the high tech fleet really fumbled hard.
I think the High Tech
There was an attempt.
the High Tech Fleet had a couple of really good ships, and then it just had a dozen kites. Oh, sorry, not kites. Mercuries. Kites would have been better.
Mercuries aren't so bad, but only missile Mercuries. It's not they are going to be at short a knife fighting range, and they will pop like crazy.
Yeah.
They needed a beam somewhere, attack beam.
The entire high tech fleet was basically picked from the most suicidal ships in the high tech lineup, also.
I mean, it did have a
With
pair
both
of
the Odyssey and the Shrikes, which have a known tendency to just plasma burn right into the enemy, was not a very good combination with the very slow Zahn fleet, which would just lag behind. And by the time the Zahn fleet got to the fight, high tech fleet would be half dead already.
yeah, and I mean the vortexes are good ships. I'll say that much. They're not as suicidal as the Shrikes, but the Zon
Very
fleet
good.
the Zon fleet didn't have a lot of luck either. The Akuklops, I remember in the first two rounds, the Akuklops was just very unable to do anything. There was just and this happened again in round 4, where the Zon fleet just wouldn't engage things. It was very timid. And
I have to say, go ahead.
Now, I don't know if the Zon fleet lacked the range to do the standoff that the AI wanted to do, or if something else was happening, but they just didn't accomplish much, even when allowed to operate more or less on their own.
I have to say, when I tested the different modes before the tournament to see who was going to be in the Premier League, Xan was about slightly weaker than the test fleets I pit them against, but I knew they were a bit carried by their super frigate, and the super frigate was blacklisted because it was so good. I believe it was very much carrying the fleet, the test fleet.
Mm-hmm. So
It's an insane ship. So
let's
without it, they are possibly very much underpowered.
let's keep moving here. Our next fleet is Team Awesome Force Prime, the other Diable fleet. This time with Interstellar Imperium, and this was a relatively successful matchup. The Dominus did pretty well. The Maelstrom did pretty well. There are just a lot of solid ships here.
It's just a well-built fleet. It's almost the ideal fleet I envisioned for the tournament.
A little bit sad
Yeah, it was
that
a
we didn't
really
end up
nice fleet.
seeing a matriarch from II through any of the tournament. But
Well-
I'm not sure how much more expensive that ship would have been.
It's bloody expensive.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah, that
think
would have exploded the budget.
Yeah, I don't think a matriarch would have really fit. You would have just had the same issue as the bad dudes with their Pandemonium, where they just didn't have budget left for the rest of the fleet.
Yeah, basically they did the smart thing of going double capital, but using a pair of very efficient capitals.
Yeah, they went for
That are
battle
fairly cheap to buy.
cruisers instead of dreadnoughts, which was a very good call. Especially because they picked two of the better battle cruisers in the Modiverse to go with, because the Dominus is just a very good ship in general, as is the Maelstrom.
Yes, and the rest of the fleet is smartly built for support. Some carriers, some long-range destroyers, the Gust, the Gust that were very, very good.
There's just enough line destroyers and cruisers that they can kind of keep the support ships alive.
They had long-range beams built in the II side that were pretty much keeping most of the enemy at bay, poking them from afar.
It was a really nicely balanced fleet.
That's my favorite fleet. It was my etalon for them. It was the fleet I used to build Wave first.
And let's move on to our next one. The Light of Nate. The Archnesis and SRA fleet. And
Another well-built fleet.
It's
easily my favorite fleet of the tournament. Cause on the Shadow Yards side we have a really nicely built Shadow Yards fleet that does what Shadow Yards does best, which is the combined arms approach of good battle line with lots of fighters to support it.
Yeah, the SRA fleet did extremely well in this because they had the Charybdis, which are just good line ships, and so the Clades doing the old retrograde advance they do didn't cause as many issues for this fleet.
Yeah, indeed.
And
I believe Shadow updated the AA for those to make them a lot more friendly to their allies.
And then, of course, Archnesis had the Lions, which are just very strong ships. Lions they're not as offensively strong as I might like, but they are very durable ships, as are the Hawks. But
yeah, the Agnisis fleet is very bad line focused. It's Guren noted how it's always those ships that get chosen, but there's a good reason for it. They built a very good basis for a fleet with the Leons and the yeah. You can then build upon that baseline front line that you built.
It's a fleet that became very good in later round. It didn't start it so well, although the patch helped a lot, the Charybdis, but it was a strong core and they could build upon it to get all those points in the later round.
Yeah, I mean, I see here that they got only 2 points in round 2, and that's just depressing.
But they did them bad.
They did
that
go
was a
on
sad fumble
to get 6 points in round 4, so that was pretty encouraging.
They got a rematch that turned out very bad, I believe.
Yeah. They had a very strong core of fighters too. The Duke gunboats from the ARS side are extremely powerful fighters, and then there was a Shikomi coming from
the Glocomi.
SRA. Yes, the Glocomi. And so that brings us.
Yes, the crash. Oh.
So that brings us to our final fleet, the Galatia Alliance, the pure vanilla and Sylphon fleet, with the most incredible redemption arc I have seen any fleet put out in a tournament. Because, we've had the Neutrino redemption arc going for a few tournaments now, but this Astral just completely fumbled the first 3 rounds and then carried the last one, and that is quite the redemption arc. I'm very happy for it.
I can't imagine the score they would have if the Dominator was the last ship they bought and they took instead the Eagle and the frigates with the Astral first.
Yeah, I think the Astral basically hanging out in the breeze by itself the first 2 rounds was a very bad idea. The Velestries formed a very good core for the fleet, but for the first wave, the Astral wasn't fast enough to form up behind them, and so it just repeatedly got caught out. And it didn't help.
The Astral in round 1 basically needed some good agile escort ships that could basically come to its
if
rescue when
instead of the Dominator round 1, they took the frigates, the Omen, maybe the Hammerhead, of course, and the Eagle, maybe. I think it would have been a whole different tournament for this fleet.
Yeah, and I mean the Astral is just very slow in general, and I think that something that they got a little bit played by is I don't know if they really expected waves to come at them from multiple directions, because that was something that hit the Astral very hard, is having to worry about waves from behind.
I don't think that much, because if you watch the replay, oftentimes every escort would move back, would pull back and go fight the second front. It did the Astral because it had no escorts, but it had.
The Astral lived for a surprisingly long amount of time, even without escorts. It was surprisingly tanky and managed to hold its own rather well against even cruiser-sized threats.
Yeah, the Astral would have survived much more if it just had agile escort that could have then come to its aid when it was in trouble, and that's what really doomed it.
The reason there was so many points to capture was that it would give visibility to the other side, so you could see the enemy coming, and the fleets could reorient themselves. The only wave that really was unfair to the Astral, that would have been, I don't recall, but the Seeker wave with the Cassowaries. That one was a bit unfair to most fleets because it was symmetrical and you couldn't deal with one side before the other strike you from the back.
Yeah. Having 2 capital ships bearing down on you, and the Cassowary is well regarded as a duelist capital.
This one, I'm not so proud about it. It was a bit unfair. Other than that, it was oftentimes either one strong fleet and a sneaky phase ship, balisongs, something like that, some special spice coming from the other side, or it was spread out.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is all of the Prime League fleets we have to go over, and if we get into the underdogs, I think we're going to be here for the next half hour talking about this or that, and let's not. Let's just go to the Q&A. Any objections?
No, not at all.
All right, so we've got some Q&A. Alex here. That fuel when no drill. Look. Tart and Nia are on a schedule here. Me and Chimni can wax poetic about drills later.
We will show some highlights later. We have some highlights of the drill.
I mean, there's no need to speak first about the drills. The drills speak for themselves.
That they do.
Indeed.
So, the first question that Alex answered was from Go-Kart. How much of the tournament did you watch? Not as much as I'd have liked. Was laid up for about a week during the earlier rounds and kind of lost the thread because of that. Did watch a fair bit of the final couple of days though, mostly in VOD form with some skipping around. So Alex kind of keeps up with the tournaments a little bit. I noticed he's kind of fallen off in the last year. He used to retweet whenever Nemo went live with a tournament. but I'm not really shocked that he missed a lot of this one. So next, also from Go-Kart, did you see any behaviors in the tournament that made you think that's weird? And he did see a clip of the Niagara facing the Gown, where the Niagara fired all of its weapons at the Gown's fighters. Which,
Yeah. I sent him a couple more clips since then.
Which
Notably,
is something that he is looking at.
Yeah, I sent him the occupal that was paired by the Metafalica.
Uh-huh.
That one is pretty egregious, and the Caesar that couldn't decide if it wanted to fire at the Gawan or at the marksman's.
So then we have one final question from Go-Kart. What's the biggest issue you have with the AI as it currently functions? Probably how it deals with fighters. It's just a tough one since the decision to ignore fighters and go for a kill is too strategic for the AI to make consistently. So it kind of has to try and play the attrition game. And then in a lot of cases it leads to a slow demise. On the player side, this isn't too bad since the player can/is expected to give orders to let the AI know when to be more aggressive, and can intervene with their flagship too. But on the enemy side, its hesitation can make for some too easy wins for the players. I think probably the best way to handle this is to de-emphasize fighters a bit, so that winning the attrition game against them is more viable, and thus more often the right choice. In the next release, I think things will head in that direction. Less skills buffing fighters, especially en masse, and stronger skills that counter them.
Fighter nerfs, people. Fighter nerfs.
Fighter nerfs are needed. We all know that.
You heard, you heard this first.
Yeah, the age of fighters is ending with the next patch, supposedly.
That and the AI fixes against fighter and the hints to weapons will be such an help.
Yeah, I think that hitting the fighters with a sledgehammer of nerfs will be mitigated enough by the AI being less focused on fighters that it'll probably still they'll probably still be pretty viable.
I hope that fighters, if they get nerfed, would be to revert to the good old time when they were very much not as fast. They had the zero flux boost, and they were a lot slower when they get close and start firing.
Yeah. So next up, we have a question from Archaon. Do you have a favorite fleet? A favorite boss? As I mentioned, I didn't get to see the earlier rounds, so wasn't quite immersed enough to have a favorite fleet. I really like the boss ships in the last couple of waves, though. The Cataclysm and whatever the name of the Animal Skull ship is, that one looks very neat, and I'm partial to modular ships.
So the last
was
round,
the Savior, I think.
No, I think he's referring to the Gown. I think it was Orica who very much referred to the Gown as looking like an animal skull with it when the bow was pointed towards the bottom of the screen.
yeah, that makes sense.
So, and the Gown is a gorgeous ship. Absolutely.
That it is.
Flagship.
So next up we have Chimni's question. Hello, Chimney. What recent games have had an influence on your original concept for the game, and how they affected changes? I'm tempted to say Crusader Kings, because it made me go, wait, maybe Starsector Tools tips don't actually have too much stuff in them, but that would be unkind. Also, glass houses. I really enjoyed Heretic Operative. It's not a direct influence as far as specific mechanics, but the way it handles resources in an abstract but very evocative way. Go to the library district and do research to get 2 points of lore, then spend that lore to pass some kind of magic-flavored challenge. It's really clean. It's board game heritage shows, and I think that kind of elegant design is something to strive for. Also, wow, do I ever want to make a Starsector game of that kind. That'd be so much fun.
Tabletop RPG.
Tabletop
Starsector.
RPG Starsector. Oh god. So then we have Cum's question. Will it be possible to set the personality of a ship without officers in the future? I find that a good number of ships, such as the Buffalo Mark II and dedicated carriers, don't reach their full efficiency without a personality check, and hopefully we won't need an officer for that in the next version. I don't see that. I don't see doing that. No. If anything, the game is moving towards smaller battles and ships with officers being the norm the more the game progresses. For example, in the next release, the base number of officers will be 8, 10 with skills. To me, that scale feels much more right for the game than, say, deploying 20 plus ships. And of course, you can use the Doctrine control to set the personality of all unofficered ships, though that lacks any fine control over specific ships.
A lot of people won't be happy about that, but I am.
It is acceptable, I guess. It's nice that something is being done here. He's not just saying, no, I'm not going to do anything about that. But it is something that I would like to see happen myself.
I mean, moving
Smaller
towards a
fleets
smaller
is
fleet is nice.
It's
But
better
anyone
at
doesn't know
every
about it?
point. The game runs smoother, the battle size isn't bloated. I think it's a good choice.
It is.
Yeah, and it also means these smaller ships don't get invalidated so quickly.
Probably too, because officer as the baseline make some strong frigates.
Yeah, frigates can become very relevant with an officer. Next up, we have a question from Revis. Will the system AI of ships with non-maneuvering jets, mobility ship systems, be improved? I don't mind that much that low-tech gang goes in neck-deep with burn drives, since they at least have armor, but I can't stand having AI strikes or Odyssey, possibly the Fury too, recklessly using their system. They're just too nuts and only use the system to directly attack something. Yeah, in the next release, I fixed a few bugs with burn drive that I think should make for a lot less random charged and died episodes. The same AI applies to the Strike / Odyssey / etc. Also, on a related note, the AI should be much better about not getting in over its head at the very start of an engagement while using a fast ship. This sort of thing would be most visible with, say, an Aurora versus 3 to 4 large enemies. It'd charge in too close, and then start the proper strafe to make enemies get in each other's way behavior while already taking fire from all sides. Now, it'll do that a good bit earlier. A range value was set too low, so it was doing a just get near the target behavior for too long. So this should make faster ships not basically have a significant chance of getting killed at the start. Generally speaking, once the initial phase of the battle is over, it'd settle down a bit. But now it'll be that way from the very start.
That will help frigates too.
Yeah, I agree, because a big problem that frigates have in some late game fleets is you might have a very strong frigate, but it just rushes in and gets itself offed.
Yeah, they have short range weapons and they want to use them way too much when they should be distraction rather than offensive ships.
And they just don't keep track. They just don't consider where their allies are. They don't think, I don't have any allies near, I shouldn't engage.
That would be, I don't know. I do not mention anything about that, but that would be.
I don't think he's doing anything about that, but I do think that is
that
something
would be
that's happening
fair
to him.
to look at. Yes,
it would be very hard to fix.
There is some bad behavior on the campaign map. Fleets wait for each other to gang on you.
Yeah. And next, Morsha asks, could carriers prioritize self-defense when attacked instead of sending their wings to the other side of the map? That doesn't sound like any fun. More seriously, I fixed a few bugs with the where to send wings logic, but I don't recall whether they were related to this issue, or just to sending them at the wrong target without considering what the nearby combat ships are doing. If there's a reasonably easy to reproduce vanilla scenario, I'm almost always be game to check it out.
I should send him the clip of the Astral sending bombers to I don't recall which wave to the super far target while attacked by a couple of destroyers at short range.
Yeah, I do think that carriers should prioritize self-defense, especially non-combat carriers. They should prioritize, hey, this ship is directly engaging me, I need to respond to it. But I mean, evidently that's only a maybe if that's going to get fixed right now.
Yes, but it's a maybe as long as we can't provide a scenario to reproduce the issue.
Basically, people get clips of carriers not defending themselves.
Not clips. He wants a way to reproduce it to check if this his changes fixed it or if he needs to further work on that AI.
Yeah. Next, we have a question from Starasp. Will there be any changes to the ship AI that lets them use weapons of different ranges more efficiently? I'd love to see AI that can decide to close in and use higher DPS low range small weapons instead of trying to only use its longest range ones. Well, reckless officers should already do that by default, and in general, if I recall correctly, the AI for other personality types will do this as well, situationally. For example, the balanced apogee with antimatter blasters will close in to use them, but it's not going to prioritize that over putting itself in danger of being flanked. And that's the problem with closing in.
Yeah, it should do that. With the officers getting more common, it should help with that behavior, since you could go more easily. You could get more easily aggressive officers in every ship that have different range weapons. So I think while Alex won't make any changes specifically to address that issue, he gives us means to address it on our side.
Prismatic Flux says, a question to the members of the stream, how do you feel about the balance of fighters considering the incoming nerfs, but also the AI fixes incoming?
It's wait and see for now, but hopefully it will be a bit less overwhelming to face big fleets of carriers.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think I already articulated my feelings, where I think that fighters are just very strong right now, oppressively so, and a huge nerf to them is very much needed. But I think that the AI changes, where the AI is going to focus on fighters a lot less, is going to mitigate it and hopefully keep fighters from just falling back into the bin they were in before the carrier rework, where they were effectively a waste of fleet space.
Some of the balance.
I'm fully in support of it 100%. I fell in love with this game when the fighters were in the dumpster. I love the concept of just battleships duking it out. It's far more interesting than just commanding swarms of fighters from the back line, and dealing with carriers on the enemy side that constantly do that is, while it can be interesting for a while, it quickly gets irritating more than fun.
I strongly disagree with the fact. Sorry.
Yeah, the thing with fighters in Starsector currently is that they aren't very interesting in their behavior. Because you only have really attack and comeback orders, which makes fighter play very binary and not very interesting. The
To be
carriers are very
fair,
boring to pilot.
that wasn't the case before. You could order fighters around before.
Yeah, you could, but now you can't.
And at that time, people always said fighters were useless. They were a force multiplier. Having fighters was better than not having fighters, but you couldn't have only fighters.
I think the issue with fighters before the carrier rework wasn't that fighters weren't powerful. It was that fighters were effectively a level below frigates in terms of staying power. So they very, very quickly fell off after the initial contact of the two fleets. Because
yes and no, they could come. They were replenished, so it was a constant nuisance. I think a lot of the issue with fighters is that it's self-balancing. If fighters are weak, you will issue PD weapons a lot, and you will again be victim of fighter fire. But if fighters are strong, you spam PD weapon everywhere, and you can barely manage it. So it's something that I think will, with fighter a bit less powerful, will self-balance. It's just that you will build the ships differently to be adapted to the threat they pose.
And let's get on to our last question from Tartiflette himself here. What's up with the AI tanking HIL? High intensity laser shots with their face and not their shield. If there's a vanilla scenario that can reproduce this, I'd really love to see it. In general, as long as it just burns off some armor and doesn't kill the ship outright, the AI has a fair amount of tolerance for taking armor damage. Kind of the price it pays for being able to armor tank at all. Still, if there's an egregious case, I'd like to see it. Provided clips. The first example is just spinning with an engine flame out. No. The second, though, that's really weird. Is it possible it activated a ship system that does something movement related, or its AI are forcing a specific movement pattern? That doesn't look like something the vanilla AI would do. The movement pattern is really odd and kind of artificial looking, like the acceleration/turn acceleration values are extremely high. I suppose it's not impossible that it got confused by the missile stream, though. The capital ship's system only increases the flux dissipation. It does nothing to the maneuverability. Ah, I was looking at the wrong ships. A couple of frigates. Interesting. Two possibilities are either, for some reason, it's pointing shields towards fighters. I'll keep an eye out for that. The other one is that one of the ships on the shield pointing side has a too large collision radius specified, and it's shielding against that. Or, I suppose, if a ship system on a fighter specified a threat? Not sure. I'll keep an eye out, though. To definitively fix something like that, I'll really need to reproduce it and figure out what's going on. Not so much a question answer as it was just kind of a back and forth that Alex is looking into some AI issues we saw in the tournament.
It's something that he can see, so it's a matter of encountering the issue in vanilla.
Yeah. And that is the last of the Q&A we have here, so...
Lots of cool info.
Yes. So now we can start talking about some behind-the-scenes stuff. Oh god, why is that out of...
We have also a couple of highlights to share. Don't know.
We have
Wow. What happened?
Sorry, I had to move that sprite sheet. So, I believe before we get into the highlights, we want to talk about... Tart wants to talk about the boss ships, right?
Well, we can do that.
I mean, if you want... it wasn't an agreed upon schedule here, I apologize, but...
No, it's okay, it's alright.
We kind of decided that having a rigid, agreed upon schedule would just be a bit oppressive for all of us. So we're playing this a bit by ear, but if you want to go over highlights before we get into behind the scenes stuff.
Yes, maybe that, or maybe we can talk about the next tournament, or I don't know.
Next tournament? I mean, that's,
yes.
the understandable.
I feel like next tournament should probably be like the last bit of the stream, I'm thinking.
Okay, maybe that's right. I thought that bosses would be the last bit, but
you thought they would be?
I don't know.
I understand. Well, we'll get into some next tournament stuff then.
All right.
So,
what worked this time? What didn't? I'd say the biggest hurdle this tournament was that fleets were damn too big.
Fleets very quick, especially having 2 fleets per side. I definitely think that they did get a bit big. We had like double capital ship fleets, and with strong self-sufficient lines each, and so enemy fleets had to be able to take on 2 fleets at a time.
I think there's a bit of bloat on both the player fleets and the hostile fleets. If for no other reason, then a lot of streamers' computers were also slowing down a bit mid-combat.
Yeah, that was a big issue.
Ratios.
Yeah, the late rounds were really dragging on.
And testing was a nightmare. Testing because we ran each wave at least 3 times, maybe 4, plus the initial not wave every team generally 3 times, maybe 4, plus the generic one that served to build the wave maybe dozens and dozens of times, and if you count at 30 minutes per, it quickly becomes very long. And I watched back at some of the earlier tournaments, and fleets. An early fleet was like 2 cruisers, 3 frigates, and a destroyer. So it was very much more decisive to have a good loadout.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the individual fleet sizes were fine, but we had 2 of each, and that really blew things out of proportion.
Yes, in PvP it would have been alright, but those fleet size were definitely not suitable for PvE.
Not only that, if you have smaller player fleets, it kind of lets you get more attached to each individual ship and lets heroes emerge and lets you like focus on every part of the battle instead of madly swinging around the battle trying to focus on where the damage is when your fight's going on 4 sides and ships dying everywhere.
Indeed,
it's a little bit less cinematic and more absolute chaos.
Yeah,
it was one of the reasons I had to have fleets spawning for multiple sides. It was to keep the battle at a smaller scale. Otherwise, you have just 2 wall of shields firing at each other, and you can't discern anything that is going on.
Yeah, I think that there were a few ships that were very memorable in this tournament, like the Galaxy Brain Enlightenment. I don't think people are going to forget that anytime soon. But also, like, there wasn't any room for smaller ships to shine.
Pretty much. So my idea for maybe a future tournament would be to consider that capital ships are really, really, really too expensive. You can't have a budget that allows capital ships and at the same time keep fleet size manageable. So I would move to a DP tournament, a maintenance like so monthly cost plus deployment cost, but I would also keep the equipment budget. And I would go with a very generous equipment budget with a somewhat restrained deployment budget.
Yeah, I think a deployment budget is definitely going to be the way to go with the recent cost bloating. But if the intent here is to keep fleets more manageable, is there going to be a move from having both fleets able to field a capital ship plus escorts to a more constrained budget where one fleet can field a capital ship and very light escorts and has to depend on the other stronger escorts, kind of like what the Astral did in round one? Or is the budget going to be constrained such that capital ships just aren't realistic for either fleet?
I would
Well,
like
the
to
idea
keep.
is the idea is with a DP budget, you swing things more in favor of capitals. The issue right now is that capitals are really expensive for how much DP you get out of them.
Yeah, it's on one side, DP wise they are quite cheap, but on the upfront cost they are quite expensive. But I think DP is slightly a better deal, balance wise, fleet size wise, and since it's twice the DP cost effectively, since it's monthly cost plus deployment cost, the difference is still very much present.
A DP budget is also much more tangible than a credit cost budget. Like a DP budget of 100 has a very clear implication for how big a fleet can be, whereas a credit budget of 500,000 only has an implication for how big the fleet can be depending on faction.
I would go even lower. I would go 75, twice that. So 150.
Yeah, 100 was just a number I kind of pulled out of air.
Yeah, but 150 double since it's double cost. That
Yeah,
would
DP budget also has the advantage of being more open to new participants because it's much easier to build a fleet when you can easily
you can fine
pre-calculate
tune.
the DP.
You can fine tune your ship, your fleet at a much higher degree.
Uh,
And with that, the since it's DP and you don't have an incentive to keep your ship anymore, I would make the ship get effectively veterancy. I would give an officer to every single ship, and they gain one level of veterancy, one max skilled per round they stay in the fleet. That way you can discard ships for basically free because it's just DP cost, and but you lose a little bit of power because your new ship doesn't have a leveled officer. But if you made a mistake, you only lose one skill, so it's not as much of a big deal as it is right now, given the cost of the ship.
mm-hmm. I know we mentioned earlier that we think that the SO fleet might have fallen off harder if the tournament had gone on longer. Are there any plans to change the length of tournaments or rounds in the future?
For PvE, not at all. It's very much straining already.
Yeah, I understand. I kind of meant that either way though. Like any intent to make them shorter, like only a 3-round tournament or less waves, more
with
intense
smaller
waves.
with smaller fleets, it would be already a lot less draining, and well, I could also give up on making some awesome bosses every round, every time.
Yeah,
That would be an option to lighten the load.
yeah. As we have here on the screen, the Guardian next to the round 1 and 2 bosses. The round 1 and 2 bosses were colossal in scale. F in the chat for Tart's hands having to sprite these.
I did push a lot of pixels for this one.
Admittedly, the safeguard is not too rough since it is having kit bashed.
Well, it's surprisingly it was surprisingly painted over because but you will see in the whips actually. You can
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
so
you have the whips of the safeguards on Unsearch.
Yeah, I have the work in progress you sent me. Let me throw up the safeguard real quick. Uh, I do find it interesting how the safeguard got much chunkier from its initial draft to the refined silhouette. Like it got that little trench on the side and got much larger, and then
Yeah.
the addition of the head is very noticeable.
Every one of them got the head last because I wanted to have a base ship that worked without it to show how it was transformed. And but initially, the safeguard wasn't meant as a boss. It was just I wanted to make a derelict, a cool derelict, with a big gun.
And the biggest gun, a Titan cannon. Like
Yeah, it was quite big. It became bigger than I initially thought it would be.
I screamed the first time I saw one of that mass driver go off because that shockwave was giving me Interstellar Imperium Titan missile flashbacks.
Yeah, it was inspired by Knights of Sidonia. They have in the earlier manga, they have a huge chunk of metal driver.
yeah, that's a pretty great scene in that show.
Yeah, it is a very flashy and exceptional weapon, I gotta say. The safeguard just feels like it's going to be a very imposing ship to fight in campaign when it gets implemented.
Yeah, I hope to have it relatively soon in the game. I mean, well, I have plans for this. Maybe we can go over that a bit later when for to go over all of them at once. But yes, I want to have it relatively soon, and when because I think it's easy. It would be easier to fight it when you have frigates rather than when you have a big fleet.
Yeah, I think part of the bit that made the safeguard so punishing to fight was that fleets were very depleted by the end of the round, and so it was able to concentrate its stunning firepower at relatively small clumps of targets.
Obviously, every fleet would have chewed any of the bosses if they were the first wave.
Uh-huh.
No doubt about that.
I mean, the main gun on the safeguard is basically just a PD check.
A bit,
If you have a ship with decent point defense going up against the safeguard, it will actually very effectively shoot down the canisters.
I don't know. The Niagara is a pretty PD heavy ship, and it did got pretty much mauled by the canister.
There's another thing to consider is that the Safeguard has more missiles it puts out that saturates PD than just the transorbital mass driver.
Yeah, I wasn't nice with the squalls. Squalls are terrifying.
I've actually got all of the work in progress gifts right here. If you want to move on to the next one and talk about the rampage.
Yeah, sure. Since we got over the intention for the next tournament.
The rampage is an interesting boss to me because it showed up in the mid tech wave, but it didn't look like a mid tech ship to me.
Initially, it was the last boss. It was the final boss because it looks non-human.
It just looks downright alien. It's actually I very much like the look of it. Once once the paneling, mounts, and all that stuff was added, it's a very, very cool looking ship. But and I see that it just had so much work done to it from the raw kit.
I need to. That's the one ship I need to rework the most. I want to touch up every one of them because I had to do them so fast. But this one is the one that might see quite a bit of fine tuning, let's say, because the hull is so uniformly detailed. There isn't a big trench area with machinery. There isn't huge separation between plates. It's too uniformly green with wire everywhere, with little lights everywhere. There isn't a big structure to the ship.
It doesn't. It feels more biological than mechanical.
That was a bit the intention, but that's not the first time I do that. Like the Dawn is very much not technologically looking, but still there is a way to give off manufactured feel.
Mm-hmm. So the intent's going to be to rework it to look more biomechanical.
The opposite, to look a bit really weird, but still a machine.
Okay. So just purely mechanical.
Purely mechanical. It should look like a made of some kind of metal, weird metal maybe, but not. It's not. What I don't want it to look like is a dead animal that you put engine on into it.
It's a very
Because
imposing
I did that
ship in the frontal departments. Like after the safeguard, I have to say I didn't find the Rampage as flashy as the safeguard, but I did find the Rampage to be absolutely terrifying in the level of firepower it put out.
Yeah, the scripts needs a bit of work too. The area denial effect was way too weak. It should have pushed everything away,
Mm-hmm.
not just missile a little bit.
Speaking of bosses that were kind of underwhelming in their performance, let's talk about the White Dwarf a little bit. The White Dwarf seems to have gone through the most iteration before you settled on a silhouette for it.
Maybe I don't think so because the silhouette was just the initial step. That's the only ship I had no idea what it would look like when I started the tournament.
Uh-huh.
Everything else, I had something on the back burner for a while. That's why I started with silhouettes. But then once I started, it just, well, I fell off the pen.
It's a very... I'm not quite sure how to describe the White Dwarf's profile. It's very familiarly Remnant, though.
That was very much intended. Well, if you look closely, there is a full Radiant in there, just unchanged.
Yeah. I was about to say that it just looks like a...
If you have
Radiant
the
rescale.
card with all the ship next to each other, I put the Radiant for reference.
Yes, you did. Throw that one up. Why is that one off?
The
Why
finished
is that
version
one
of these
off?
bosses, the Safeguard had one red eye, the Rampage had two, and the White Dwarf here has three red eyes. We seem to be gaining eyes as we go through the bosses here, and I'm kind of
And
enjoying
Cataclysm
that.
has 4.
Yeah, the
Yeah, and the
Cataclysm
Cataclysm
has
has four eyes.
Four
So what's next?
eyes.
So yeah, you can see there is a full Radiant. It's a modified Radiant.
Just like right around the bow area of the moduleless White Dwarf. The White Dwarf was... It very much made up for what the Rampage lacked in presentation, I feel. I think, if I remember correctly, the first time the White Dwarf appeared, or at least the first time I saw it fought, it just got punked, basically.
Yeah,
It was against Dr.
the
Hollins.
AI dubbed really hard trying to look left and right, because it had the firepower to deal with that fleet
And
with
then
a bit of luck.
And then in the later waves where it was reached, it was absolutely horrifying. Very much a more everything Radiant. It had more forward firepower. It had all the fighter spam you'd expect of Remnants. It had horrifying forward firepower.
The long range weapons are pretty nasty. They
Yeah,
have a
those
huge
guns are really good anti-crowd weapons.
reach. And,
And there's just so many large slots on this.
the core has only large slots and small slots. There is no mediums on the center part, and there is only 6 medium outpoints.
Yeah, the rear facing missiles.
There is no mediums, just big weapons.
The mediums were I very much like the configuration of the mediums, but that's just like me nitpicking aesthetics.
I very much made the missiles to look cool in those slots with long streaks.
While we're looking at the sprite sheets, we can talk a little bit about like the fact that you made a heavy blaster fighter. What the fuck is wrong with you, my man?
That's not the one. That's the Yon Pulsar one. This the Pillbug is Yon Pulsar fighter.
Mm-hmm.
The
Which
the heavy
is
blaster
no less
is
terrifying, mind you.
It was the beetle that has the blaster.
the Beetle.
Right? Yeah, we kind of missed it while we were looking at the rampage. We didn't talk about the weapons or anything. But seriously, heavy blaster fighter. What the fuck?
Half fire rate, to be fair. The fire rate.
Very low fire rate. I understand.
And
that's
also with ammo limitations. So
gonna be a spicy meatball to get
It
a hold
now
of.
has an ammo limitation. I don't think I put it during the tournament. I think I changed that.
The tournament already.
In the tournament, I removed it in the last version because the fighter wouldn't go back to rearm.
I think that these fighters are very much going to be worth hunting down some of these bosses in campaign to salvage the OPCs.
Well, wait until they get their limiting factor. I'd say, because all those weapons you will be able to get them, but they will have a pretty nasty drawback.
And then the Cataclysm. I'm gonna throw up the work in progress for the Cataclysm. And everybody called this the second we saw that this is just a 40k ship turned into a Starsector.
You could say it's a split ship. It's a split ship from X4, X3.
Okay.
Also, I mean, I try to keep the silhouette of a 40k ship, but I try to texture it like a split ship.
Yeah, the material is definitely very split-like.
It very much is recognizable as a 40k ship, and the work in progress puts it next to an actual profile silhouette shot of the source 40k ship, so you can see where the Cataclysm diverges very noticeably.
Yeah, it was something I wanted to do for a long time. I wanted to make to show, because everyone is always asking, "Hey, I want a 40k ship. I want a 40k ship," and every model that try it starts with the Imperium, the one faction you cannot do in a top-down game.
Yeah, it just does not work. Those designs are just purely vertical. It just does not work.
Which is sad, because every other faction has great ship that can be easily fine-tuned for top-down view, notably the Chaos ship.
Yeah, the Tau ships are basically pancakes a lot of the times.
And the Necrons. The Necrons are just flat crescents.
Yeah, I think the Eldar ships might be a bit tricky, but the only way to make Imperium ships work in 2D is to heavily modify them so that they're effectively not Imperium ships anymore.
I mean, even Eldar ships are pretty easy to adapt, since they have a pretty notable top-down profile. They are still quite wide, and it's just put all guns on the nose. At least for
The
Corsairs.
I think Eldars would be easy to adapt because you just have to put wings and they look like Eldars. And the Space Marines ships could be tricky to get the broadside, but at least you have a flat head. But Imperium ships, basically, you have the Gothic class, the one that has weapon sponsons, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think the Cataclysm was a very compelling round 4 boss because nobody saw it coming. I can't believe you guys did a hidden boss at the end of the tournament.
It was so obvious to me and to Nia.
Like, I'm not really shocked that nobody beat the Cataclysm, given not only how powerful it is, but by the fact that it was a secret Wave 7 boss.
Funnily
escorts.
enough, the Cataclysm was originally planned to be the round 2 boss.
Yeah, I swapped Cataclysm and Rampage.
Mm-hmm.
But I had
Given how powerful the Cataclysm is, I do not think it. I think it would have completely shut out everyone in Wave 2.
To be fair, I decided to change them when I started to sprite Cataclysm. Yes, Cataclysm, because I had only made Rampage that was very strong, and I thought, yeah, that's a nice final boss. And then I started to do Cataclysm, and I thought, yeah, no,
This is the
Yeah,
final boss.
this is
Yeah,
the one.
it was
Definitely.
very clear very soon that Cataclysm would really be quite a bit above the Rampage.
Yeah, the Cataclysm, the broadside on this thing, and the special ability, it is a genuinely unholy terror.
It was a last minute addition because initially I wanted an ability that would basically leech all CR from other ships while the activity was active. It would drain CR from everything in range and slowly raise its own CR.
That would be horrifying to fight.
Yes, but it was. But the problem is that it basically is on off and that's it. There is no interaction.
Mm.
Yeah, that something like that will just work better as a hull mod.
It would have it would have been fine as a passive ability, and I still intend to add something like that as a passive ability, just not active ship system.
Right. It's going to be very unpleasant to track down and fight in campaign, I see. Very much going to take a pound of flesh from anyone who tries to track one down.
Well, it's
Yeah, but you
technically
get
a
some
final
cool weapons out
boss.
of it.
Now that we've gone over the works in progress, I believe you sent over some updated descriptions for these guys.
Yes, I expanded the descriptions because they are what I think they are related to what I think will be the end game for Alex.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna take a minute to go over these real quick, if that's all right.
Ah, yes, there are plenty of other smaller bosses because Nia did an awesome job with many ships too.
I just kind of threw up a sprite sheet. We have the Lost Tech here. Lost Tech was an interesting one. Like, I wasn't really expecting Lost Tech, and having Remnant super ships is something that I've talked about at length with people more than a few times since round 1 as being a very good way to make the Remnants more compelling as opponents, because so many Remnant ships are just fodder, and being able to mix in a couple of super ships like the Nirvana or the Samsara is very powerful.
Yeah, although that's not really going to happen anytime soon.
I figured that probably wasn't actually going to happen. Unfortunately, I kind of hoped that was what was going to happen, but I had the feeling in the back of my head that's not what was going to happen. This was going to be a separate thing.
Like it would have been a cool idea. The problem is it defeats the purpose of derelicts in the general game design. Derelicts are very much designed to be early game enemies that are relatively easy to beat, that you encounter in your explorations, and they are in a similar way designed to be weaker than other enemies, similar to how pirates are also designed to be weaker than faction fleets.
Uh-huh. I get that, and in my mind, you wouldn't have even seen. You would have seen like Rigvedas around the time that the game was starting to throw, wanting to throw like heavy cruisers and capital ships into derelict fleet. So they would have been very delayed in their introduction, but that would have been a lot of work to implement properly, I'm sure.
Yeah, that would be very tricky to balance too, because you'd have to avoid tossing one of those at an early game player fleet and just wrecking the player, which would just feel very unsatisfying.
Yeah.
They are so crude. That's a big change.
They are also entirely crude ships.
They are
like
not
the
derelicts.
They're not. They are the lore design behind these is it's more like they look kind of like derelicts because what the thing that built them saw derelicts and just copied them visually.
Uh-huh. So these are crude ships that will be playable.
They are probably they are. I made them as exploration continents.
Oh my.
So stuff you can find as derelicts. So you can have cool stuff you can find, which is very unusual.
Oh, that is something.
Instead of just finding blueprints here and there, and a Legion 14.
But to the boss descriptions, we have already.
You have the other one, the other mini boss.
The followers, the cultist and zealot class. The system of Abraxia was one of the first hit by Cataclysm. The local population watched helplessly as the monstrosity of a ship consumed most of their technological base and infected the rest with what can only be described as a plague. Given how crazy were the times were so soon after the collapse, it is no surprise it took more than 5 cycles for the system to be visited by a group of scavengers. It is only after they took some of the few thousand starving survivors left on board that they discovered a cult had developed on the main planet. Survivors believed Cataclysm was the harbinger of the end times, and helping it in its endeavor was the only way to salvation. The cultists quickly took over the ships, modified them in the image of Cataclysm, and somehow managed to track it to travel alongside it. While it is unclear whether there is any communication between the cultists and their deadly deity, it is evident that they developed a symbiotic relationship. The cultists are providing a valuable escort, and Cataclysm is leaving aside an immense amount of supplies and material for them during its feast times. Cataclysm itself. Cataclysm was first encountered in the system of Abraxia when it emerged near the disabled gate sometime around cycle 64 post-collapse. In a matter of weeks, it thoroughly destroyed all the infrastructure of the system, and according to survivors, absorbed most of it to repair itself and grow. After that striking event, it vanished for nearly a decade before new rumors of sightings were reported. It all seemed like ghost ship stories until another system was hit. Since then, Cataclysm is always tracked by military forces and bounty hunters alike, rarely found. While it has a prodigious firepower by itself, Cataclysm still would not be able to take over entire systems by brute force. Instead, its appearances have all been preceded by a period of reliability decrease and technological breakdown. In extreme cases, it has been reported that critical machinery would start to deform and get covered in plague-like cysts right before Cataclysm itself showed up. By then, local defense fleets can rarely mount anything greater than a token Barud d'Honneur, and communications are too scrambled to call for help, even if anyone would answer such a hail.
Yeah, you started by the end. There is a building up through the bosses.
I should have ended with this one.
Yeah, well, it's too bad.
It is a bit late. I apologize, and I kind of have them at newest at top order, so I was just going down the down my list here.
It's alright. It's just that I intend to build up the thing through the campaign to have you start by a safeguard that is just an enigma, and it's also a derelict ship, so it's still familiar, and then you work your way up.
Cataclysm, otherworldly horror. Any chance for properly blue skins for Cataclysm, just as planned?
No, I don't think I want to get into skins for that ship.
Let's start from Safeguard and work our way up properly for the next. These sturdy exploration platforms assisted spore ships with their terraformation projects. Sent to gather resources on a grand scale from barren worlds, they had decent production capacities of their own and were equipped with advanced AI cores to operate autonomously from the spore ship. However, this particular one seems to have been modified by someone, or something. It was nicknamed Safeguard by the captain of the first ship sent to encounter it. No communication could be established with the ship using regular ship-to-ship channels, and none of the usual noise was detected on the domain explorarium frequencies. Safeguard used to be almost entirely passive, only maintaining its orbit around a gas giant, until a boarding was attempted. While communications were scrambled as the marine shuttle approached the landing bay, direct telescope observations showed the team penetrating the service door of the hangar without issues. 6 minutes and 22 seconds later, the ship activated its shields and opened fire on the observation fleet. After the battle that saw 7 cruisers destroyed as well as their escort, one of the boarding party helmets has been found floating in space. It had no sign of damage or blood. Furthermore, it had no sign that it had been worn at all, including a complete absence of loose hairs or skin cells. The computer chip had been reset to its factory state, with no recording to recover. Since then, Safeguard has been maintaining a strict exclusion zone inside the system, using its modified mass driver to strike offending ships from its orbit.
Yeah, that's the introduction. So you find something weird. There's not much an explanation of why or what, but you can understand there is something off. It's not a derelict per se.
It doesn't look like a derelict. Something is very wrong.
There's something inside, something that, well, took a crew.
Something much more thorough and powerful than anything we've seen in the sector yet.
Well, it's maybe yes, maybe no. It kind of reminds you of the Guardian.
The Guardian, yeah. The Rampage. While the
It's
signature of the
beast.
While the signature of the engine would designate this ship as part of the domain explorarium, a glance of the hull composition and design will dispel that hypothesis immediately. This ship, nowadays known as Rampage, features components and weapons from all eras of the domain, somehow integrated on a chassis of unknown origin into a working warship. No communication attempts yielded an intelligible response so far, although signals have been detected in response from hails. While Rampage's answer to hostile actions is frightening in its efficiency, it rarely actively pursues other ships as long as they keep their distance. However far removed from the beaten paths the design is, fragments of the hull recovered after one such deadly encounter revealed a composition and manufacturing process very much in line with domain technology. Given the complete absence of anything remotely similar in the remaining archives, it is believed that Rampage traveled to the Persian sector from a remote area of the domain. Such a hypothesis does yield several concerning corollaries. Given its recent apparition in the neighboring star systems, did it arrive recently? If so, how did it get here? Are the gates still active in nearby sectors and Rampage could use them? Or they are not and it has incredibly efficient hyperspace engines? Does it use hyperspace technology at all? Or worse, was Rampage here all along? But then why did it become active all of a sudden?
Yeah, working our way up to the tension. This one is inactive at first, but suddenly become active and start doing stuff. Maybe having it's territorial, but the size of the territory could increase over time. So there is a point where if it's close enough to the core, you have to deal with it at a point.
Mm-hmm.
Very fun. There's no war in the Persian sector.
There are no eldritch space monsters in the Persian sector. And then, the White Dwarf. What was first thought to be a modified AI Radiant turned out to be, well, that technically, but not just that. While often found in remnant space, White Dwarf does not act like one. While it would destroy any ship and probe coming too close, it does not hunt man-made spaceships nor answer hails. It does not even help other remnant ships when they are in trouble, as shown during the Elysia campaign. White Dwarf was spotted loitering around the star as a combined hegemonic and Ludic fleet was destroying the system's nexus. After the fleet departed, scouts left behind to observe its behavior reported that White Dwarf then moved to the station's wreckage and started cannibalizing it. Given its apparent passivity and visibly considerable firepower, the hegemonic Admiralty decided to not try to destroy White Dwarf unless it started moving in the direction of the core worlds. The Ludic Admiralty disagreed with that decision and sent one, then a second expedition to take out what they saw as an AI abomination. The reports from the few survivors made them join the hegemony in their wait and observe stance. Scholars are constantly debating whether the existence of White Dwarf is proof that some alpha AIs have achieved a full conscience. They argue that its behavior shows complete self-determination following different goals and desires. This is something that a Nexus would never allow in a newly manufactured core, if only for self-preservation purposes. Therefore, it is a deliberate moral choice to let cores decide their purposes. Others argue that it may just be a glitch in a single unit.
Yeah, you start to see the similarity that will come with Cataclysm. It's something that has no defined path, but sometimes it will feed on something. It will destroy stations and use their materials to build itself. And something nobody seems to have noticed is it's a remnant. It's not something that came from outside. A remnant ship is built in the percent sector. It's something local, and yet it has the same same things growing inside it.
Yeah. The implication here very much seems to be not that these are foreign technology that the domain had, but that something is subverting and repurposing domain technology.
Yes, and that's very much in line to some hints that Alex and David hinted at. Notably, if you go to they mentioned several times that their favorite book is the Revelation series from Alistair Reynolds, Revelation Space series, and it's pretty much the universe is big. It's a decaying universe because of some form of technological plague. And if you combine that with the weapons that Alex showed us, the hull-eating weapons, the stuff that just has lasting effect and seems to devour armor. You look at the wisps that he showed. I sent you a link to the
hold on.
to the other GIF.
Can't actually full screen this, so y'all are gonna have to bear with the scale. This is not the right weapon. Go. Well, we'll just leave it here.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't look like anything we had so far. So it got to be something else.
Yes, something is happening. Something is entering the sector, and I think that we are going to see an actual resolution to why the gates went down.
Yes, and I think the biggest hint is obviously the Guardian description. That is just plain text. There is something that is taking over ships and repurposing them.
Yes, something built the Guardian out of presumably the remains of multiple Explorarium drones, but it is not an Explorarium drone itself.
Pretty much. It's something that has been repurposed, and that really makes a lot of echoes to Alistair Reynolds' Plague. So that's pretty much what I'm going for. I think the endgame is some form of nanomachine AI Plague, and that's why the gates were shut. It's basically confinement.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be also a pretty interesting thing. It offers a lot of interesting endgames implication. There are a lot of options for an interesting endgame where you have to shape the future of the sector, not just political structure. You have a very strong enemy that needs to take drastic action against.
Yeah.
I like that theory as well, because that may give you some reason to not just explore rapidly everywhere you can go and delve into every rune and distant star
Indeed.
system you can find for exploration's sake. It'll give you a reason not to do that, which the game currently needs. It needs a trade-off for that.
Yes, and going far could encounter those things that are very much. It could be very much a wave that slowly creeps its way towards the core, and
Yeah,
you have to do something about it.
Yeah, an aggressive nanoplague sure would be an interesting endgame threat to be added to the game in this year in particular.
Yeah, I definitely think that Starsector needs a endgame crisis, kind of like Stellaris or Battle Brothers, because Battle Brothers is a very similar game to Starsector in format, where you build a group of soldiers and travel around a world doing this or that, collecting goods, trading, fighting enemies, all to just build money and hire more soldiers and better gear. But past a point, Battle Brothers acknowledges that your company is going to become ridiculously swole, and you're going to body most of the threats that the normal game can throw at you. So it throws a massively buffed endgame crisis at you, the massive invasion of orcs, or the dead start rising across the continent, something like that. And having something on that scale of, oh shit, everything's on fire now for Starsector is going to be really good once the player has a colony or two under their belts and they're able to manufacture their own ships reliably.
Yeah, and Alex precised that he wouldn't like an endgame threat that just happen at a date. He wants something with that we have an effect in triggering, and there is many ways that you wake up something you shouldn't have, or you manage to reactivate a gate. There are a lot of ways that you can involuntarily trigger the crisis by yourself and have to deal with the fallout.
Sauzer just asked us for our opinions on the theory that the gates were intentionally cut off from the outside to
That's pretty
quarantine
much
the
what we're
Persian
talking
sector.
about.
Yeah,
But
I don't think that quarantining the Persian sector to keep something from getting to the Persian sector is what happened, because the 14th Battle Group slow-boated into the Persian sector. If they quarantined the Persian sector from the outside, they wouldn't have sent a battle group into it.
Yeah, it's more like it was
they
a
shut
global
everything.
gate shutdown to slow down a sudden happening spread of this nanoplague. That is more what Tart is imagining, I think.
That is
Yes.
possible, yeah.
And
It's the same as basically canceling all international travel in the current day and age.
it's similar to the another book, the Dan Simmons, the man, I forgot the name.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably Tritachion's fault. Whatever happened.
Dan Simmons wrote Hyperion, Endymion, and the Endymion had AI hidden between the gates, in short, and that was something that it's almost a prequel to Starsector.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I always do.
And I think it's also very much in the theme of several games already that could serve as inspiration for a resolution. You can think about iWar 2, where you have such an AI plague that goes everywhere, and you lure them through a gate that you reactivated just for that threat to lure them away and save your your sector. You have the Mass Effect style ending where you can choose whether
No.
you can
No
choose.
Mass Effect, please.
Well, I'm sorry, but if it was
Differently colored lights, though.
if it was something you worked toward and you decided well in advance what ending you would want and you would work towards, I think it could have been a great ending. But the way it was sprung on you, like, hey, choose your color, was just terrible. But the ending themselves are interesting. You go synthesis? Do you let the AI plague meld with humans? Maybe that can be an option. Do you go full cultist and you let the plague kill everyone, or do you try to fight it and find some cure to. But it also destroy all AIs, and therefore destroy your way of life. Everyone becomes a lewd follower after that. There are ways to take the same themes and run with it. You have also the Jupiter incident, Nexus the Jupiter incident, that had an ending like that, where you counteract the AI and render them non-threatening. There are many ways it could be worked.
We're a little bit over our 2-hour time frame, and we haven't even talked about highlights yet.
Indeed.
So we should probably get to those. Let me pull up some. Ooh, hello. Let's pull up some clips. Tart sent me some clips for us to go over, and
we didn't go to the highlights of Scalar Tech either.
The appearance of Scalar Tech was something.
I just meant you skipped the Scalar Tech card. You showed the
Oh, the Lost Tech one? Yeah, no, I didn't
the
get
Lost
to the
Tech one?
Scalar Tech sprite sheet. If you want to go over that real quick.
Just because it's Nia's big creation, I think it's worth looking at.
It is, because Nia just effectively just pulled out a whole ass faction. God.
Yeah, and we have some behind the scene about how they came to be.
Yeah.
That was a bit of an accident.
Nia was saying Nia made I think you made the starfish ship. Just before.
I made that just for
Yes, but
fun
you were talking. So you were saying to me that you had trouble to make cool ship from scratch without some kit bashing vanilla material, and I suggested you to use concept art.
Yeah, I've got those screenshots that Tart sent me, where he recommended Nia worked from some concept art, and then Nia produced.
Just a few weeks later, I said, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had a fake boss?" And what do you see? A few days later, he comes up with, "Hey, I'm working on the boss faction." What?
Yeah, that was like originally it was just going to be a single standalone chapter, and then I figured, yeah, maybe I can just bash some escorts for it.
Yeah, and you forgot to sleep.
And
showed up.
soon later, I basically had a whole faction sprite and
A full-size faction in a couple of weeks. That was insane.
Today, I am going to make a boss ship for the 10th Starsector Fleetbuilding Tournament. 1 week later, oops, I have a whole faction. Oh, God.
That was so insane. I mean, it put I did faction pretty quickly, but that was really fast.
It just popped out of nowhere. I mean, hearing that Scalar Tech is something that just kind of emerged from Nia saying, I don't really want Lost Tech to be like the highlight of this tournament for me.
Actually, if you check the date, he said that after he started to make Scalar Tech. It was just that little dodge. It's a bait. Don't expect anything else from me. Boom! Faction.
Just a whole ass faction. Like, I mean, Scalar Tech came out with much more to it than the Lost Tech. So honestly, I kind of expected to find out that Scalar Tech had been in the works for almost the entire length of the tournament, if not longer.
yeah, no, that I started work on that after the first round.
You can check. Wait, it's June already. It's just after the first one.
Yeah, that's a very, very fast turnaround for what is effectively a whole faction.
I mean, I have a lot of backlog stuff that I can use. I was able to take a lot of shortcuts by just adapting scripts I already had for whatever stuff I have on my other stuff. That's something people underestimate is the more you have made, the easier it is to make new stuff because you have just a giant library of things you can base it on.
I think
And a
that
giant ID sheet. I have a document full of ideas I never made, and but they emerge when doing something else.
I think that the most impressive part of Scalar Tech as a faction is the bridgehead design, which is a very unique take, both conceptually and mechanically, on carriers.
Yeah, you
That
actually have
was
to
fun.
thank Todd for that. He first recommended that.
When I saw those lights, I was, hey, that reminds me of Homeworld. Yeah, the mission 13 where there are hyperspace way always open.
Hmm. Yeah, and it certainly is quite the spectacle seeing the Scalar Tech carriers just teleport in wings of fighters.
Yeah,
Although
originally that ring was just going to be a really fancy phase teleporter thing for the capital because it was planned as a fancy 60 DP boss ship.
Uh,
So it was gonna teleport like some crazy thing. And then Todd recommended, yeah, actually that looks like a porter, and so I turned it into a port and just warped in fighters.
the
although
gown,
it,
the gown is insane to me because not only is it a competent boss ship because it's super capital, it manages to be a very player-based super capital.
I'd say every Super Cup is a player bait anyway.
I mean, some of them more so than others. Some super capitals like the Siegfried, I think, struggle a little bit because they're just so damn slow. But like the Pandemonium and the Gown actually have some agility to back up their
I don't
mass.
think I would qualify it as a super capital. It's big, but it doesn't fit a very combat role. It's very much defensive,
The
Yeah,
Siegfried,
it's a flying gun.
you can work it into a combat ship, but it's very much a station bit, something to deal with stations.
hmm,
Yeah,
I,
the gown just happened. I don't know. I can't really remember how it happened. It just kind of happened. I figured I just want to make a big ship,
It
and
happened when I said that you should have two versions of your capital. One with there is a full carrier with just the ring, and one where you get just the central part as a
no,
combat
that's how
ship.
the strand happened.
And and well, I believe you decide to make a module out of it.
it's a beautiful ship and very powerful to boot. I did a bunch of testing on the Gown as soon as it came out. And I was thoroughly impressed by its destructive capabilities. But
What
I mean,
one of the
I kept it fairly tame for what it is, because the thing is, I wanted this to actually be a playable ship that still fits within the balance spectrum. So it's a 100 DP capital. It's crazy strong. It's just also crazy expensive to deploy. And
having the modules is kind of a double-edged blade in that regard because it means that it kind of dodges the usual super capital issue of just having a bajillion ordnance points because it can be spread across 3 distinct sections of the ship. But it
yeah,
also
that
means that it has 3
that
flux
is actually
pools.
why it has the modules in the first place. Like, originally made the ship without modules, and then very quickly realized, yeah, that this shit doesn't work. Starsector doesn't scale to that scale properly, because you have to consider the OP is basically designed to work in tiers. You have 4 ship tiers, and the capital and the gown had too many mounts to really work for the capital amount of OP. You'd have to put so much OP and so much base dissipation on the ship for it to be able to fire those. So you really have, when you have a ship this big, you really have to split off parts as modules, because then the scaling works properly.
Having the 3 distinct flux pools, though,
yeah,
it does
that's a
make the
trade-off.
Gown very powerful as an artillery platform and allows it to take on just whole swaths of ships.
That's a trade-off with modules. can have more manageable OPs. You get less scalability up front in the loadout, but the ship is vastly more versatile because unless you script it against, you will have effectively three pools of flux.
Yeah, I leveraged the full might of the Modiverse into my gown testing, and one of the strongest loadouts I found for it was, forget what I put in the spinal large slots, but I put mince spectrometers in the wings just because high explosive beam lasers with a massive flux footprint was a non-issue for the main shield module since they were in the wings. So I just had this insane amount of high explosive damage that I could project in two different directions if I wanted to.
Yeah, hills on the wings are just insanely effective. Like some of the scale attack weapons are even basically existent because of what proved to be really good in testing. Like the Tuzel and the Stitch both came about because I very quickly figured out putting HVDs and hills on the wing modules made this thing just delete everything in its path because hills and HVDs are just a really good combo.
Yeah.
And they are very good weapons to just put on the wings because they will shoot something and they will shoot it reliably, and you don't have to worry about not being able to control those directly.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they're just good pressure weapons.
I saw someone mentioning he used some of the boss weapons. Something I forgot to mention. Since those weapons for the boss are plague weapon, effectively, I intend to add to them some drawback when you mount more than one, a bit like interference, but something different this time. I think every weapon will reduce your max CR, like 2, 3, and 5% per weapon. So if you spam those, you will have issues of CR.
Yeah, although obviously with module ships, you also get to dodge mechanics like interference because you can just put an interference weapon on the main hull on each module, and they don't interfere with each other if they are placed on different modules.
Oh god.
Something
Which
I
is,
don't know
which
if I should
is-
fix.
Yeah, that's definitely something you might want to look into.
Yes, maybe not, but because it's hard to to really push things,
Yeah,
even
I mean
with
it's
that.
also fine because you have to consider when you have a modular ship of this scale, you basically putting out multiple ships worth of ship in one there.
Mhm.
So it's probably not too difficult.
Well, so we have in the interest of getting to it at some point today, let's go on to the highlights.
Yes.
I do have some clips that Tart sent me. Unfortunately, I kind of got brought onto this on like Wednesday of last week, and I had to catch up on VODs, so I didn't have time to troll through clips and curate my own. But Tart was kind enough to send me some, so.
There are a few ones. Essentially,
Butterfly goes down. Right, we actually we'll get through this wave, I think.
Not
Esme goes
everything,
down.
but well, only one drill because there are many flips of drills.
It's still alive. It's still high flux. It needs to get out of there though. It's getting pulled in by the whirlwinds. The whirlwinds stop it from running away.
The
They take it to
whirlwind
the side.
wave.
It gets out free to the side. It has no engines, but it's still.
I was going to talk about how the
This
whirlwind
zone is
wave
getting-
consistently proved itself very good because the whirlwinds were just exceptional at pulling stuff out of position.
Yeah, that's their
A
wall.
little bit too exceptional there.
We don't have the sound though, Serge. I don't know if you have it on your side, but
I
don't.
do have it on my side. Unfortunately, I don't actually have any way to put the
Okay, all right.
audio for that in here.
The commentary was pretty great on that one.
Yeah, that character there was just such a hero. It just survived that and then just kept going for how many more waves?
Not a lot because Seeker Wave was pretty late.
Yeah, but I think it survived till the end, more or less.
Chat is
saying
telling me
that
I mean,
the VOD was
volume
very
is
loud.
too much on the VODs.
It survived till the wave they wiped on, I believe.
We drilling the dawn?
Are we drilling the dawns? Drill the dawns.
The drills.
That one might die, but this one might drill the dawn. Drill the dawn.
Yeah, I
Drill the
took
dawn.
one drill.
Drill it!
One
Drill,
clip of
drill the
drill.
dawn, drill the dawn. It dies, but it drills the dawn. The dawn explosion kills it
The
off.
drill
but
is
it managed to
clearly
drill
a
the dawn.
crowd favorite.
The drills deserved
Yes.
everything they got as far as just affection from the crowd, because the Kingdom of Tartiflette, I don't think that it would have really worked on any level if it tried to seriously go for a win in Prime League, but holy shit, the spectacle. It was such a fantastic fleet to watch work.
I'm really happy how exhibition match worked because they went spectacular for the spectacle, and then it wasn't. My fear was that without the ranking, maybe people would just put three ships together and just throw that to the stream. But no, they try to make stuff interesting.
Yeah, I think that Laharl and oh god, who's the other person? Who are they paired with? Nausicaa. Yeah, Laharl and Nausicaa really just went all in and were just absolute heroes of the exhibition matches with two very spectacular fleets from lesser known mods that I don't think they didn't do particularly well in any round, but they were just fun to watch every time they came out.
To be fair, had they been so successful, it may have become old quickly. Because if you have, I don't know, 40 minutes of drilling, it's a bit long.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a one-trick pony, and I think they did just the right amount of drilling to not get boring.
Yes,
Well,
it could have overstayed its welcome.
I think they at least had a fallback gimmick in the Carolina.
Yes, that too. That ship was fun too.
Yeah, the Carolina. I'm very disappointed that the Mammoths stole the show from the Carolina so consistently once the Carolina appeared, but S2K wants to know if his and Silver's fleet was fun to watch. Oh god, the Beehive. Oh, let's put a pin in the Red Fleet for a bit. I don't have
Right.
anything mean to say about it, but
I don't have a good clip of the bees.
yeah, the Red and Dassault fleet was just a constant deluge of fighters and torpedoes, and it's hard to really have a complex opinion on all that because just holy shit, it's a lot of missiles, man. Like there wasn't the spectacle of drill it, drill it, drill it, drill it, but holy Christ, the violence, damage output.
Also, where were the frames? There were no frames. It was a slideshow.
A lot of beams, unfortunately, on the side of the
That was sexy.
flying saucer. Okay, integrity is overloaded. Several shots coming in against the integrity now, including
There you go.
Vespa shots. Rationales go down. Commitments go down.
Get some
Oh, I remember
Deckles
this.
still has not yet fired the hammer
This is
claw.
the Hammer Claw.
Oh, we gotta watch for that.
Oh,
It
there he
should
goes.
be.
Oh,
Oh, is this the triple kill?
yes, with the Hammer Claw, where it just bumped into a commitment, nudged it out of the way, and went straight into another commitment. 3 ships all exploded at once.
Those Hammerclaw missiles are. I love seeing a good missile from those go
Yeah,
off.
Hammer Claws just whiff so often, but they're so spectacular when they actually connect. It's super satisfying whenever it happens.
They are also quite unreliable in that you can bend them around and take them to your own face.
Yes.
You know, it's kind of like a ranged drill, thinking about it.
I mean, the Gonadactylus is a mining ship, so it is exactly a ranged drill. Then we have a clip from the Templar wave, which, oh my god, we'll talk about the Templars in a second.
Oh, did it just get
That was a
pummeled
fun
by the
one to have too.
first said cannon? I think it did. Oh! Sadly, that 7,000 was for the wreckage of the.
Right into the
the
face of the
martyr, not
Enlightenment.
The Enlightenment again,
But,
it's taking some frontal armor damage, but it's pretty much fine.
Can we talk about
Martyrs.
the Templars?
That was
Missiles
so
with
good.
extra steps.
The Templars, I cannot fucking believe that the Templars came back for this.
I'm so happy. I couldn't believe it either. I'm just.
I couldn't
I was
have
like beyond words.
Cicerone couldn't update Birdie. I had to get something else.
I was so close to screaming when I saw that the Templars were back.
Other did that the screaming for you.
I would have screamed if I wasn't at work when I found out. Because, oh god, I have, as I said on my server, the day of, in fewer words, effectively, I have a very strong love-hate relationship with the Templars that is very strong on the hate side. Where I love them, I install them and play with them every time, but god, I hate the Templars.
Love to hate them, which is a good place for a boss faction.
Like, the first thing I did when the Templars came out and I got back into Starsector was I started a stream save where my mission is explicitly kill the Templars. Because I have so many memories of the Templars being just awful to fight. And I want my revenge. I cannot believe that DR just snuck them into the tournament. And I will never forgive him for that.
When you heard that, I certainly didn't refuse. And the way he played everyone to update every one of these other mods so that nobody could suspect anything.
Yeah, it was the perfect crime, too, because he updated everything at once and then just Templar snuck out alongside. Yeah, Templar is never coming back, said all of us, the fools.
Yeah, Dia definitely played his role very excellently.
He played his hand, and oh my god.
It's the Templars. They had to come back in a dramatic fashion or not at all. They couldn't just be brought back normally. It had to be dramatic.
It did.
Yeah, and it was.
And I was thinking to myself, are we going to see, like, some Templar bullshit in the last wave? Or in the last round? Probably not. DR has said they won't be coming back for a while. Maybe in the next tournament. And just the Templar, come back.
Wave 5 to not have
Not
the
even
boss.
the boss wave!
We had something else, something entirely new.
I'm glad that the Templar were what finally broke the back of Dockaholics Anonymous. I know that Dockaholics Anonymous technically beat the Templar, but the backbone of their SO contingent was just shattered over the Templar. The Templar completely broke the fleet's back over their knee, and Dockaholics only carried through the Templar wave by sheer momentum. And I'm very glad that if anything stopped their reign of terror this tournament, it was the Templars.
Well, the third round boss, White Dwarf, did really very much stop them in their track.
True. It was able to prevent another 6-point win.
I totally didn't made the White Dwarf have a huge AoE weapon because of the cowlick. Totally not something that I did.
Oh,
Oh,
the
so
Enlightenment
close.
getting pulled in by the Cataclysm. Oh, this one.
So close.
Oh, this hurt.
Enlightenment versus the world.
The
So
Galaxy
perfect.
Brain Enlightenment.
That is.
What?
That's
Honestly, I
a
found this
tractor
rather
beam of some
joyous too
kind.
much.
It's
Is
bringing
it
it
the
into
same
range.
I bet you like that one.
Yep, disable the enemy into range. Oh my god. That
That
disabled
poor
range and
enlightenment.
brought it into range.
You
Poor-
see,
poor
if
enlightenment.
it had weapon in every slot, it probably wouldn't have flamed out.
Jesus.
Because the arc would have hit
It
the
got
weapons
pummeled
too.
to bits. F for the enlightenment. My god, fine.
Oh god.
That was incredible.
Come here.
Oh.
And no broadside. It can't do anything.
Yeah.
Brutal. That's always so brutal. It's like a supercharged whirlwind combined with an EMP. Just so much of just, hey you don't get to do anything.
Yeah, fuck that ship in particular.
Yes.
Well, that was also something I wanted to do for the last boss. Instead of the other bosses, I had all a big AOE weapon, something that killed everything in range. Cataclysm has none of that. It only has direct fire weapon, something that it's one target and one target alone. But without the pull, it was too weak because everything would charge at once and it would get surrounded. So I gave it that system to just take ships, big ships if possible, one by one, and just grind its way through the enemies.
So the calculator of
It's-
that is then just go full assault and accept a couple losses before you can get this round off on it.
Yeah, it absolutely made the Cataclysm a true horror to fight. Oh yeah, the
don't understand what's happening
Metaphalica refusing to kill the
Genuinely do not
Occuplops.
understand what's happening here.
The,
Get out of
the
the way, let
pain.
it shoot! Your buddy needs to fire a gun!
Oh,
Oh no!
He
The,
wants
meta-
the glory for himself.
the Metaphalica will get it! The Metaphalica will get the kill!
Oh no.
It's-
switch targets.
It's switched
I think
targets at the last
everyone
minute.
was.
Never mind Metaphalica.
It hurts whenever you just see something like, and now it
It is!
switches targets.
What's
goes
it
to friendly
doing?
after the overload. After. Why? Why now?
Why are
I-
you doing
Oh
this?
my god!
I sent that clip to Alex.
Oh my god!
It
So
didn't
that can
deserve
take
that.
Why?
No, and
Oh.
now he switched back. No, he was killed. I think it was going to switch back to the Occupol.
Oh. Threw
hurts
it
so much to
so
see.
hard.
He could have killed both.
Question: could a player-controlled whirlwind save a friendly ship from being devoured by the Cataclysm?
I think. I don't know.
Interesting. I kind of like that if it would.
That's a very fringe
If-
interaction.
If it doesn't, I need to make it do so.
That's also a good way of saying, my ally is going up way too far. I'm in the whirlwind. Hey, let me just stop that.
Like using
I'm
a
very
siren.
happy to be wrong.
Or just taking
Maybe
a
I'm
leash for a badly
I
trained
remember
dog.
not being that impressed with players last time, but
You take a siren,
okay,
you
it
shoot
comes
the
in
allies in your back,
straight
and
into the transit.
look at that, they come back.
Oh no, the transit versus the
The
rampage.
transit's okay. The transit's not doing too badly.
Oh
that
no.
one was painful for me, specifically.
A lot of the lasers that are getting hit with our point defense. There's the tachyons.
The transit just shrugging it off.
Pushing, it's falling back.
Yeah, maybe a
Taking
bit
taking
too
hull
much.
damage now.
That's
Buchanan is
not
doing hull damage to the
something
left
that
wing.
should happen.
Ward.
Severe hull damage to the left wing. Left wing's about to go down. Left wing's gonna go down so soon.
Taking that much
The
firepower
Rampage
and just
reprioritizes the McCarran because it has
I
to.
can still
Left
walk
wing goes
back.
down. Left
And
wing goes
then
down.
talking
Taking
about Lester's
frontal
being
hull
tanky.
damage. Taking frontal hull damage now.
The transit
Extremely
being
high
able
flux.
to just straight up.
Right wing
Just
taking damage now.
Square
Its face
up
tanking the
against the
McCarran
rampage was absolutely insane.
and taking us so much. I'm not sure what those waves do.
On the
What do
one
those waves
hand,
do?
I think that frigates that have mobility systems such as this one, such as
No, the
jump,
fluxes are changing. Right wing
cost
goes down.
pretty much nothing.
Only
is a
the
good
middle of the
thing
rampage is
because
left.
you
It's definitely pushing
are
things away.
always
It's
ready
definitely
high
pushing things
flux.
away.
On the other hand, on
But that's
the
a
capital
front
ship,
shield only.
I
That
think
is
it
a
would be
front
better
only
that you have
shield.
some commitment to
It's dead with it.
It's so dead.
keep some flux
It is so
free
dead.
to jump back.
It's stopping.
It blocked projectiles as well.
And the transit
And
carried
the Pulse
that.
did nothing. It should have just swing back the Moroccan, and it's not doing that. Also, Achilles.
They they actually couldn't hear you over the highlight there, unfortunately. But yeah, just the transit being able to just square up against the Rampage, absolutely bonkers. I have one more highlight that Tart sent me.
Yeah, and I think that will be it.
Crazy.
Oh,
So I have to
Whoa.
give credit to
Yep.
Zan Capital though. It is definitely surviving.
it can take a hell of a beating.
Jesus Christ.
My god, that thing's got a lot of hull. That takes a lot of punishment, and it's doing a very good job at sort of spreading it out on the armor. Oh, it's just getting pushed everywhere. This is gonna die. No! It almost gets squished between two hulls. Overloaded, though, that's probably it.
Overloaded.
How many things die? Only one ship dies. The overloaded ship dies to the explosion. But
They
wave
took
3
it out.
The
vanquished.
Zahn
Oh my
again.
god, that is a vicious
Poor
wave.
Zan.
It's just all of the funny fail highlights you sent me are just the Zahn, and I think that's just depressing. But that's about what the Zahn's tournament
To be fair,
experience
one is by the Zan. No, it's none of them are Zan fault. It's the wave that do funny things to Zan.
Mhm.
And yes, Zan are underpowered, I think. They were deceptively good in testing due to their super frigate. That was very much insane.
Immediately blacklisted.
Immediately. I didn't even ask for rework.
Yeah. I don't have a highlight for it, but I do want to bring it up here in stream. The Onyx. Gee, I don't know who got cheated more. The Onyx for not ever accomplishing anything, or the fleet that lost ships to the Onyx.
To be fair, I watched some clips back. The Onyx did quite a bit of work, always off screen. It didn't do anything in the first or second fleet, so the streamers never look at it ever again. And when you look at the kill feed, it did kill quite a few cruisers. Not as much as it needed to, but often it killed one or two every time, every fleet. So it wasn't as useless as I believed at first. A bit useless. Sadly, not good enough.
It's
Not useless, but just much less effective than it should have been.
Yes, indeed, and that did make every subsequent wave too weak because the fleets were in much better shape than they should have.
Yeah, well, I mean, it didn't matter much. The Cataclysm still swept everything that made it to it.
To be fair, I really didn't hold anything back with the Cataclysm. I really, it was losing in every other fight during testing, and then I added the cultists.
Yeah, the
Perfect as it
cultists.
is, you didn't need to have anything held back on it.
It was the last one. I wanted to have some spectacle.
S2K wants to know if him and Silver get any props for managing to dent the Cataclysm paint.
I believe so. I believe congratulations are in order. You hurt it a little bit.
You made it bleed. I remember watching that on live. You're like, it can bleed. We can kill it.
And
But
then
nobody did.
dead.
Oh man, I very much looking forward to trying to actually kill the Cataclysm in campaign play.
Yeah,
Because-
sadly, I will need quite a bit of time before they are in campaign, at least in any form that is not just HVD.
Which is understandable because there's going to be a lot of, as you said, most of these fleets, if they hit any of these bosses at full strength, would have just mopped the floor with them. And I don't think I do not expect the Cataclysm to be an exception there.
No, I don't think so. It's if you can deal quickly with the escort, it should have come down pretty quickly. It doesn't have full shield coverage. Oh, it's so slow. It doesn't matter, and the side arcs are pretty narrow. So if you go to the back, it's very vulnerable to the back.
Yeah, and the AI doesn't make use of escort orders very well, so cultists and so the follower ships won't exactly hang around the back to keep you from sitting in it.
Although I could technically, if I really want to go all in with Spectacle, I would probably add some custom orders to the fleet. I can do that. It's one of the benefits with reworking the AI, the Admiral AI, is that now I very much understand how it works, and I could do things with that. By the way, for the next tournament, I believe if I can, I will allow players to set up order scheme. Say, do you want escort order on X ship, Y ship, and the like.
Yeah, being able to set escort orders specifically would be pretty game changing for that tournament because I think as we mentioned, like the Astral not having escorts, that could have been at least a little bit partially alleviated by forcing the Dominator to hang out around it.
I don't think I would make it specific to a ship because if that ship dies, then there is no escort. It would be standing as escort order that automatically ships cycle through.
Right. So just escort this capital ship, so and so.
Find a ship to escort it. And you can choose a bit which ship get escorted because you can have light, medium, and heavy escort. And they assign frigates, destroyers, or cruiser and above. No, they don't. Capital ship are never escorting another capital ship.
Unless explicitly ordered, yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
only explicitly ordered.
Heavy will pick like a cruiser, or if it can't find one, it'll pick 2 destroyers or something.
Yeah, something like that. Often a cruiser and a frigate, something that can mix the defense against different threats.
Yeah, an almost 3-hour stream. Remember when we were gonna do this in only like 2 hours?
Yeah, but with some well-needed time to go over every fleet. That's pretty much. We went through everything. Yeah, unless I believe if someone has question in the chat, maybe we can take 1 or 2.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions.
But yes, other than that, I think we can slowly head toward closure.
Because I mean, we've already taken a couple of questions from chat earlier, mostly about our opinions on various things. But if anyone has anything in chat they want to ask Nia or Tart.
When are we getting Imperial ships? I did say no. You can't. You can't make Imperial ships looking good from top down unless you rework with them very hard. But then they aren't Imperial ships anymore. What was my favorite fleet? The Diable and Interstellar Imperium one. Definitely this one by a long mile because that's exactly the kind of fleet I wanted to see. It's just the right amount of capital ship, cruiser, destroyer, a very well balanced fleet.
Yeah, it was a nice fleet too. It was a fun fleet to watch, especially.
How do you think Alex should handle AI core and the relationship between humans and the player faction? That's something I have no idea. I think it will very much depend on the endgame threat.
Yeah, I think it should be something that also is influenced by player actions. Because like how how do you treat AI and what do you think about AI? Like one of those just standard good sci-fi questions where you can have player interaction.
It depends also what is the right now AI have very limited agency. They are very much just a background threat. They don't take specific actions. So you would to have a specific relationship, you would have to give them some personality. They need agency then.
What do you think of the viability of some random Yahoo like me hosting another tournament using existing resources just so that we continue to have community stuff going on? I mean, as long as you don't pull a Lightning JC, it should be perfectly fine. We had Targo hosting a tournament with good success. If you can organize yourself and organize a schedule and such properly, then basically anyone can organize a tournament.
Everything is open source. It's
Please
open
don't
because
repeat
I
the
want
cursed tournament.
people to organize tournament. That's why I made everything open to be modified. I can even help. I did help some tournaments in the past, at least for the initial setup. Then running them, not so much because it's just too much time, and I have so many things to do.
Yeah, I mean, even just running a PvP tournament is, from the organizational point, much easier. Most people can do that as long as they have the will to set aside the time
Yes,
and
very
sit
much.
through it all. The missions are very easy to configure. It's really not that difficult. Tart has pretty much everything set up already.
Thago has been a great help this time to make the tournament submission script application, and something that will be definitely good to keep developing and make organizing tournaments even more easy in the future.
Yeah, the entire process is pretty streamlined at this point.
The more time consuming things is just checking everything all the time, because you don't just get this time there were 32 players, you don't just get 32 submissions because there are always mistakes. You get 40, 35 submissions you have to check, you have to add to the mission. It's quite a bit of work. If you all were to add more major MNO events to the campaign map, what would you add? That's a bit vast. I have so many things I already laid out in Seeker.
Yeah, I have a lot of things I would like to do if campaign scripting wasn't such a giant pain in the ass.
Rule CSV.
Yeah, basically, if it involves using rules CSV, it just goes on my blacklist of things. No,
It's
I'm not
dead
doing
in
it.
the water.
It's dead in the water unless I can offload it onto Nick or something. Like, God bless Nick.
I need my
A
Nick.
lot of things I made would not exist for his script wizardry because my scripting is not brilliant. It's gotten better, but for the really cool, complex stuff, I really still rely on Nick. He made the fancy portal effects for scale attack and such.
Mm.
And if I can ever bug him into doing some more campaign scripts for me, I'd like to make the Lost Tech content more interesting, and that you have actual sort of fleet encounters when you find those things, and such and stuff like that. Third probably has much more complicated things in mind.
Yeah, I add, I'll say, because when I started to work on writing down quests with just very basic branching, it became a pain, an incommensurable pain. It's just the problem is that making branching is tough already. It's something that has so many situations that you can think in advance that you have to be very careful, And if you add on top of that an open world where you can completely open, you can just have some dude with a frigate or an endgame fleet, and doing quests that can account for that is very much complicated.
Yeah, so basically for quests, if you want to scale your combat encounters and quests, you basically can only generate the encounter fleets dynamically when the fight is supposed to happen. Otherwise, if you generate it at a different point, then you can have the player sitting there, not doing the quest for a while. And when they finally get to the quest, they roll up in 3 paragons, and there is your little remnant fleet with a brilliant and a few destroyers.
That's a reason why Seeker Popper, the other Seeker, the one with the anomalies, essentially there is half of the anomalies aren't combat related. They do something else, something that involves some gameplay, but it's very much not combat gameplay. So
I
you
mean,
have
I mean,
to.
your signature Seeker flagship doesn't have any guns, so
Yes, yeah, that one indeed. But it's yes, the intention was to have something else, and it's very frustrating that I wasn't able to put them in the game yet, because I had almost half the quests, the actual combat map, let's say, interaction done, that you don't have to actually combat in. You have to do that. You have some other action require that needs you to pilot a specific ship, do specific things, and with a non-combat threat to deal with.
Anything else anyone wants to ask? Last call here. I think we're gonna be wrapping up in the next couple minutes here. We're
how many how many cups of coffee were required for you to get through the tournament?
What? Sorry, which?
How much coffee was required for you to get through the tournament?
I don't drink coffee. I drink tea, and
Okay, that's even better. How many cups of tea?
quite a bit. It was the thing with this tournament, that the thing why it didn't went as smoothly as I hoped, with the crash, with the airbags, is in large part due to scheduling of my day job that changed very much. So from
Yeah, I remember that. That was
I had a job for
quite
4 weeks that turned out to be a rush job for 7 weeks, so quite a bit more. And then I just had to jump into another job. So yeah, there was very much. I had planned to get 3 weeks off, that just landed when I planned the tournament. I scheduled it for that, so at that moment, and I didn't get those. So that's why I've been rushing through, and it was a bit tense at times.
yeah. There was tournament proved being
The
quite a bit of work.
moving to 2 week schedule really was necessary. I couldn't have held the rhythm of weekly battles, weekly rounds.
I mean, the slow schedule worked out rather conveniently for me too.
Yes, indeed.
And then even then I still ended up having to pull a long night to like 4 a.m. once.
And yet, 2 week schedule makes for a very long tournament. It lasted 2 months.
Yeah, it gets a
too
bit
much.
draining.
It's just too much.
I'm at least a little bit glad that I didn't try to take on tournament streaming on top of my day job, but I remain somewhat upset that the schedule just wasn't able to mesh with mine.
On the
Yeah,
opposite
but
side of that,
The issue
on
is you pretty much have to schedule the tournaments so that people can work on their fleet submissions over the weekend, because that's the time you can reasonably assume that people will have time to actually work on their fleets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tournaments are not just about making something extremely fair for the player. I think that's something that a lot of complaints I received about tournament miss. It's that there is three parts to the tournament. It must be enjoyable for the participants, it must be manageable for me and for whoever that run it, and it must be interesting to watch too. And the rule really reflects that. It's not the fairest tournament. It's not the yeah. It's not the fairest, but it's fair enough. It is the goal to have a fun tournament to watch.
Well, Nemo, Shogun, Glorical, and all the others did a fantastic job hosting
Yes,
their
casting
respective
was
rounds.
excellent.
I very much enjoyed watching Fallen Shogun's rounds that he was able to cast.
Yeah, it was fun to have him back. It was just nice change of pace, very much a throwback.
I love you, Nemo, but boy, we needed other casters in here.
Nemo is still great. He has the knowledge to really make things meaningful, make sense of what you watch. He has
Yeah,
such a
Nemo
good memory for
has
ship
really,
names.
Nemo has really gone the extra mile for this tournament.
Indeed.
Like he jumped, and same for Orica. Uh, those two basically jumped in when there was no other option. Also, shout outs to Gloracle for taking on some streaming after his terrible experience with the Lightning JC Chaos tournament.
Yes, Glorical had to single-handedly shoulder the cursed tournament, and I mad respect to him for actually wanting to cast another tournament after that.
I'm glad to have made a different impression with my tournament than with ours. But we made a different impression the cursed tournament.
Yeah, I remember reading the backlog of the streamer chat, and he asked if he needed big mags, and you said no. He said, "Oh, thank God."
Oh la la.
Glorical redemption arc. All
So
right.
I mean,
kind of
Gloracle
reignited my
did not
desire to
need
stream.
redemption.
So I'm probably going to be, doing that more often in the future, and I want to participate in the next tournament instead of just be a spectator / co-host once or twice.
I think that my experience in the last PvP tournament getting bodied by Vera was about all of the tournament I can take, because God, I was so close to pulling an all-nighter, running every possible permutation just to try and crack some of the fleets I had to fight, and I am so lucky that I was able to stomp that Hammerhead fleet the way I did by just stumbling into Medusas. Oh, but
Yeah, I would say I much prefer being on the organelling side of tournaments.
Lal is asking for some recognition. He did came just in time to help when
Yeah,
I was
he
quite desperate for a streamer.
yeah, and he did a great job with Foreign Shogun, which was a really good casting streamer. Like the entire casting team has done a really nice job.
Dizzy, you were trying to talk me out of doing Medusas. Anyways, yeah, I very much enjoy casting tournaments, so I hope that my schedule is a bit more agreeable next time, or that the tournament schedule is a bit more next time. But we will see where the dice fall.
Yeah. If it's at all possible, I would be glad to have you casting.
It's just a matter of if it is possible.
Yes, indeed.
And hopefully next year it'll be more feasible for me to at least do like evening streams. So that's hopefully. I'm not gonna say anything more on that until I know for sure what my living situation is gonna be next year. Next tournament win.
Although I'm not looking forward to pull off another PvE tournament with that kind of new content to pull off.
You
Yeah,
guys
next
set a
PvE tournament is probably
terribly
a
high bar.
while off.
I thought that the sixth tournament was a high bar to beat, and yeah, no,
Y'all
it wasn't that high.
Y'all introduced 2 new factions, brought back like 4 factions from the dead, and sorry, only 3. I apologize. You brought back the Voss, you brought back Ice, brought back the Templars, you introduced Scalar Tech, you introduced Lost Tech, you introduced all of the new boss ships, which such a nightmare to sprite they must have been because they're so massive.
A couple have been tough. The only one that was really easy because I'm used to is the Remnant one. Remnant are pretty nice things to sprite.
And as you said, it is just like a modified Radiant.
Yes, I tend to rework every boss is a bit because I want them to look more like the Guardian, to have more deformed part, something very much gave us the impression that grew on top and inside it, and just is poking out of the, rather than just putting wire everywhere that look, yes, like wire.
Well, I think we can probably find other things to talk about, but we really should wrap up here.
Yes, indeed.
We are an hour over our end time. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Nia and Tartiflette, for answering questions and walking us through some of the stuff. And thank you, Chimni, for keeping us company, fighting a caster's.
You're welcome. I didn't do much, but it's nice to be here.
It's
Thanks,
nice
everyone.
You
Indeed.
were excellent room decoration.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
My primary function.
The chimney really brings the room together. Alright, well, thank you all for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Congratulations to our winners for the tournament, Daddy Pants
Indeed.
Ruben, and bye-bye.
See ya.